Chapter 365. Phone call? What's that? Under Henry's explanation, Jonah nodded and said, I understand. It's something like a communication spell. This means that you're going to contact your officials and get them to pass on the message to the king? Yes. Henry nodded. But with my status in our country, it might be more difficult to alarm the king. Jonah smiled and said casually, It's fine. At most, we'll just look for them one by one. Quickly go and make the call. Hearing that, Henry immediately became elated. This lunatic, I need to call the police quickly. He walked to the landline and picked up the microphone, dialing the numbers 112 and 112. Jonah looked at Henry curiously. At the same time, he opened up his ears and listened carefully to the voice coming from the phone. After 2 beeps, a clear female voice picked up the call and said, Hello, please speak. Hello, I'm here. He threw a glance at Jonah, who was listening curiously to the female voice coming from the phone. Henry nodded and said hesitantly, There's a magician who wants to meet King Li Onping. Magician? The lady was clearly stunned. However, at the next second, her tone was filled with displeasure. I'm sorry, please don't joke around. Otherwise, Henry said anxiously, I'm not joking. A beeping sound came from the phone. The other party had clearly hung up the call. Henry let out a bitter laugh and looked at Jonah, saying, Sir, as we've never had a magician here before, they might find it hard to believe in the existence of magicians. Hearing that, Jonah frowned and said, A bunch of ignorant aboriginals. To think that they dare to deny the existence of magicians. Henry was afraid that Jonah would do something out of his control, so he continued, Sir, I can tell them that you're a metahuman. They might be able to accept this. Metahuman? What's that? They're people with superpowers. Some of them can breathe fire, some can fly, and some can turn invisible. Jonah asked a few more questions. After hearing Henry's explanation, he nodded proudly and said, I understand. They're warlocks, right? I didn't expect that there would be warlocks here, even though there aren't any magicians. However, how can those barbarians who only know how to fight based on their instincts be compared to magicians? John asked cautiously. Then forget it. Who told you natives to have no way of understanding the greatness of mages? Just say whatever you think will succeed. Henry nodded. He quickly picked up the phone and dialed 112. After the beeping sound, a clear female voice picked up the phone. Henry didn't listen to what she said and shouted directly, Hello, I have a very powerful ability user here who wishes to meet His Majesty Li Onping. Sorry. The female voice on the other end maintained a polite tone. We can't contact Her Majesty directly. If you want to see Her Majesty, I suggest you go to Tianjing directly. When Henry heard this answer, he cursed in his heart. K. Are you crazy for answering so seriously? Hurry up and send the police over for obstructing official business. Take this lunatic away. However, he obviously did not dare to say these words out loud. He could only say, I don't care. You must inform His Majesty immediately. My friend is already impatient. Obviously, his problem couldn't be solved. After several failed attempts at persuasion, the other side hung up the phone again. When Henry was on the phone, Jonah's attention was focused on the phone. He was obviously very curious about how this small box with no magical waves could transmit the sound. After seeing Henry hang up the phone again, he frowned again. Failed again? How troublesome. She just said that we can go to Tianjing directly to find your king? Hearing this, Henry's heart jumped again. No, if I really bring him to Tianjing to find Her Majesty, it's too dangerous for me. I can't bring him to Tianjing. Thinking of this, Henry's heart suddenly lit up. This guy. He recalled all the words and actions of the other party since he entered the room. He thought with some uncertainty, this lunatic, could he really be a magician from the Holy Roland Empire? On the other side, Jonah had already stood up impatiently. Mortal, that Tianjing is in that direction. I'll fly you there directly. At first, Henry only thought of the other party as a lunatic, but now that he thought about it carefully, if the other party was really a magician from another world, then everything was not unreasonable. Thinking of this, He was even more unwilling to follow the other party to this muddy water and go to Tianjin. He said directly, "Sir, our king's whereabouts are uncertain all year round. Even if we go to Tianjin, you might not necessarily be there. It's better to let him come to us. Just find the officers in charge of public security here. Sir, you can go through them to find your way up. All right, you could try again." At this point, Jonah swallowed his saliva and said, "Is the instant noodles in that ice cave? I'll go cook another packet." Seeing that the other party went to get the instant noodles to eat again, Henry secretly scolded the country bumpkin in his heart. He picked up the phone again and dialed 112. "Hello, this is Garden Street, 112, 303. We have someone who wants to commit suicide here. Hurry up and send a police officer." "Yes, sir. We'll send someone over right away." On the other hand, Jonah had already taken out the instant noodles and started cooking them skillfully. When he saw water flowing out continuously from the tap and the kettle boiling the water automatically, he was once again astonished. The craftsmen from this world have really good skills. However, after saying this, he shook his head again. But to spend all your energy on these little tricks and give up on the great research of magic. As expected, you're still an ignorant and backward aboriginal. After saying that, he lowered his head and poured the boiled water into the instant noodles. Smelling the fragrance of the instant noodles, he broke into a satisfied smile. After being hungry for so long, I can finally eat something nice. Henry was not in the mood to debate who was more backward with this lunatic. He only waited anxiously at the side, hoping that the police would hurry over and arrest this lunatic. As for whether this guy was a lunatic or a real magician, Henry was not interested in that at all. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and Henry walked toward the door impatiently. "Sir, they should be here now. I'll go and open the door." Jonah did not even turn his head. He was sitting on the sofa and slurping down his instant noodles. Henry opened the door and saw 2 police officers standing outside. He said agitatedly, "He's an ability user and is very aggressive. You must be careful." After saying that, he hid behind the 2 of them. The 2 of them threw a strange glance at Henry. Then they saw Jonah, who was wearing a silk sleeping robe, coming out. He looked at the 2 of them in contempt and said, "The 2 of you, bring me to your king or superior. I want the highest-ranking one." The older police officer smiled helplessly and said into the walkie-talkie, "It's fine. He seems to be a lunatic. We'll come back after we've settled him." Another young policeman walked up and asked, "Friend, who do you want to see? Bring me to meet the highest-ranking official you can meet. It'll be even better for the kingdom." Saying this, Jonah was afraid that these aboriginals would waste his time, so he decided to use his extraordinary powers to intimidate them. He put out a hand, and as he opened his palm, a sphere of light appeared in his palm, illuminating the entire room. However, his actions immediately raised the wariness of the 2 police officers. Both of them pulled out the pistols at their waists and pointed them at Jonah. "He's really an ability user." The police officers pointed their guns at Jonah and then shouted in accordance with the standards for ability user criminals, "No matter what you want to do, stop immediately. Put your hands behind your head and squat down. Also, put away the thing in your hands quickly. Otherwise, we'll be shooting." Jonah had not expected that his intimidating actions would not only fail to arouse their reverence, but also arouse their hostility. Usually, if he were to reveal an illumination spell before the commoners, wouldn't they immediately kneel down and worship him? He suddenly lifted his head to look at the lights on the roof and their language. Then he came to a realization. It seems that simple spells aren't able to make the aboriginals here submit. They are so stupid. They don't understand the greatness of magic. Thinking of this, a hint of cold light flashed in Jonah's eyes. "Mortals, it seems that I'll have to teach you what reverence is." In the next moment, as Jonah pointed out with his finger, an icicle appeared out of thin air and fell, piercing a hole in the young police officer's thigh. Seeing his colleague fall down while screaming, the older police officer immediately shouted into the walkie-talkie on his shoulder, "Damn it, it's an ability user. He injured Joey. I need backup." As he spoke, he had already removed the safety of the gun at his waist. The camera on his other shoulder was also aimed at Jonah, uploading the situation to the police network. "You damn bastard." The police officer pointed his gun at Jonah, only to see him walk toward him step by step with a disdainful smile on his face. "I said don't move." He lowered the gun slightly, aimed it at Jonah's thigh, and fired a shot. The sudden sound of the gun and the bullet that came out of the barrel gave Jonah a fright. He felt that he had been attacked, but he did not understand how the other party had attacked with the weapon in his hand. However, the other party's attack had clearly not been able to break through the protective force field on the surface of his body. Instead, it had aroused his fury. "Commoner, you actually dare to attack a mage. I'll imprison your soul in the body of a pig and let you know how rude and childish your actions are." At the same time, the information regarding Jonah had been transmitted to the entire world at the speed of light. About 2 minutes later, the news had been delivered to Li Onping, who was far away in Tianjin. "Sir, we found him." Chapter 366. Have you found him? Li Onping was standing in the clouds above Tianjin. He looked at Higram, who was being held tightly by the Ningxi clone, and transmitted his will back in the form of electric signals. "Send someone to capture him. I want him alive." "Yes, sir." Higram, who was being held tightly by the Ningxi clone, looked at Li Onping's cold expression and asked fearfully, "What do you want?" He had been chased by the Ningxi clone for several hours. As his abilities had been greatly reduced and he could not replenish his energy effectively, he was still unable to shake off his opponent in the end and was captured once again. He was then sent to Li Onping in Tianjin. Li Onping grabbed Higram's head. Right now, Higram's body had shrunk to the size of a palm. With this, not only had his head completely sunk into Li Onping's palm, but a large part of his body had also sunk in as well. On the other side, after handing Higram over to Li Onping, the Ningxi clone flew in the direction of the World Crossing Gate. Li Onping planned to personally imprison the Ningxi clone from now on. "Tell me why there are humans coming from the White Land, and why there are humans who have come to Earth through the World Crossing Gate." Following Li Onping's words, Li Onping's hand gradually exerted more force, squeezing Higram's head, causing it to squeak. Under Li Onping's immense strength, Higram's head felt like it would collapse at any moment. Right now, Li Onping had broken through the electromagnetic drive and reached the final stage of matter recombination. His abilities were no longer the same as when he had been fighting against Higram a few months ago. Right now, his strength, agility, and stamina had all broken through the 70 mark. From around 60, his strength had reached 71. 2. His agility 72. 6. And his stamina 70. 1. At this stage, it was extremely difficult to increase each attribute point. Right now, even if Li Onping were to devour all of the several billion people on Earth, he would not be able to increase his attributes by 1. 0. On the other hand, his physical attributes at this stage had completely surpassed what humans knew about living creatures. Electromagnetic drive allowed him to grasp the essence of power, and material recombination allowed Li Onping's body to evolve rapidly. Under self-adjustment, Li Onping could maintain his body's strength at about 10 times that of an ordinary person. Of course, at this time, his strength, speed, and stamina would rapidly decline, far from the standard of 70 points. His energy consumption would also be greatly reduced. Once he entered combat mode, he would instantly undergo a transformation at the level of material recombination, allowing his body to be even denser than Higram's. The hardness of his skin alone would far surpass that of diamonds, titanium alloys, and other hard substances known to mankind. His internal organs, muscles, and other non-essential combat organs would all be replaced, while his nervous system would be completely replaced by electrical signals. His circulatory and respiratory systems would also be replaced by more outstanding vacuum energy pathways. Once he entered combat mode, every part of his body would become the most suitable state for combat. His physical attributes would also break through the 70 mark. As his knowledge increased, the transformation of this combat state would also become stronger and stronger. Facing Li Onping in this state, Higram felt as if his head was a piece of scrap metal under the immense pressure of his opponent, as if it would explode at any moment. "Ah, feeling that his head was starting to become deformed from the pressure. Even Hygrim could not help but cry out in agony. He shouted, "How would I know how he came over?" Lianping's gaze narrowed. Blue electric light flashed on his arm, and an even more terrifying pressure pressed down. A cracking sound rang out from Hygrim's head, and a hole appeared. B** starred. Hygrim let out a furious bellow and used his fastest speed to transmit everything he knew to Lianping through electromagnetic waves. He's a human from another world. In the White Lands, in those places where the space-time is not very stable, there are world-crossing gates that can be opened. However, there are some places that have natural world-crossing gates. He should have come over through this way. Lianping loosened his grip slightly, to think that there's something like this. Seems like I'll have to adjust my strategy. He glanced at Hygrim, who had become completely deformed in his palm, and said coldly, "From today onwards, you'll stay by my side. If I find out that you're more than 10 meters away from me, I'll squeeze out your brain juice and spread it on toast as jam." Lianping's words sent a chill down Hygrim's spine. As a demon, he could not help but shiver. This guy is even more like a demon than I am. And what's with his strength? This battle prowess is comparable to a warrior who has just entered the 8th energy level. Thinking of this, Hygrim's expression became even more honest. At the very least, before the demon race attacked, he would not have any other thoughts. At the same time, in the city of the Code Nation, Jonah began his adventure to the other world. He floated in the air above the streets, surrounded by people who had been evacuated. There were also a small number of braver people who hid in the corners, using their mobile phones to take pictures. These damned aboriginals. Jonah thought of what had happened just now and felt displeased. He had originally wanted to let the police bring him to their king, but in the end, he had been brutally attacked by the other party. After he had used spells to intimidate them, the other party had become even more agitated. With no other choice, he had killed the other party. Originally, this had not been a big deal to him. It was just killing a few mortals, which Mage had not done it before. It was just that the identity of the other party's official had made him feel that it was a little troublesome. In order not to offend the mages who might exist in the other party's kingdom, he had directly used a splitting spell to disintegrate the other party's corpse into particles that were hard to distinguish with the naked eye. He had thought that the other party would not be able to find him if he had destroyed the corpse so cleanly and cleanly. Who would have thought that he had only stayed in the room for a few minutes before those police officers came looking for him again? As for Henry, he had long since escaped when he had killed the police officers. After killing another 5 people, he knew that he had probably been exposed. Although he did not understand why, he still planned to change his position first. In the end, the moment he flew out of the building, he was attacked crazily by the other party again. The aboriginals here used a type of mechanism that could shoot out metal particles to attack. The speed of these metal particles was very fast, and even he had a hard time seeing them clearly. Fortunately, their power was not great. At the very least, they were unable to penetrate the protective force field on the surface of his body. He saw that there was no one on the streets. There were only countless metal boxes that were flashing with red and blue light that were heading in his direction. The aboriginals here were sitting in the metal boxes. When they saw him, they walked out of the boxes and attacked in his direction. Countless metal particles hit the surface of his body, and it felt as if he had been bitten by many mosquitoes. A hint of fury flashed in Jonah's eyes, and he bellowed, "You lowly ants! You don't understand what you're up against." Accompanied by his furious bellow, a blue light circle that was formed purely from cold air spread out in all directions with his body as the center. In just a few seconds, it had frozen all the matter within a range of several hundred meters. A portion of the armed police officers who had gotten out of the police cars were directly frozen into ice sculptures, while another portion of them retreated quickly. Retreat. Ordinary light weapons are ineffective. The target has the ability of ultra-low temperature. Where are our ability users? Why aren't they here yet? Looking at the police officers who had been beaten to a pulp by him with just one attack, Jonah laughed out loud. Mortals, prepare to suffer the wrath of the mages. In the next moment, as a few mysterious words were spat out from his mouth, gusts of cold wind suddenly swept up in the sky. In the next moment, countless hailstones the size of human heads smashed toward the police officers and police cars that were still rushing over from afar like cannonballs. The tremendous kinetic energy caused the cars to be smashed out of shape. Ordinary police officers who came into contact with the hailstones had their bodies torn apart. The cold air contained in the hailstones caused the surrounding temperature to drop even further. It was as if they had arrived at the South Pole in an instant. Damn it! One of the armed police officers who had rushed over took out a rocket launcher from the car. This type of firepower, which was specially used for anti-tank attacks, was far from what the previous bullets could compare to. Originally, it was impossible for ordinary armed police officers of the law countries to be equipped with rocket launchers. However, in the past 6 months, under the rule of the Pan-Continental Alliance, the entire Earth had greatly increased their investment in the military. All the weapons and equipment were upgraded almost every day. Therefore, the rocket launcher in the armed police officer's hand had originally belonged to a certain law country's army. Now, because it was too backward, it had been eliminated and given to the armed police officers to use. On the other side, when Jonah saw a rocket launcher flying toward his position, he was stunned for a moment. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. A portable ballista? Interesting, but it's so slow. I'm afraid its power isn't as great as the metal particles I can see. Therefore, he could only watch as the rocket launcher hit the protective force field on the surface of his body. Boom! It was as if a firework had bloomed in the sky. The tremendous impact sent Jonah flying. One must know that this type of rocket launcher was specially used to deal with tanks and destroy fortifications. Although Jonah's body was protected by the defensive force field and did not suffer much damage, he was still sent flying like a rubber ball and crashed into a building. His whole brain was buzzing, and he had a slight concussion. In the midst of the ruins, Jonah slowly stood up. His eyes were burning with rage. He was actually sent flying by a mortal. This was simply a great humiliation. You lowly, despicable, stupid mortals. You've completely angered a mage. At this moment, an ear-piercing sound of something breaking through the air rang out in the sky. As a fighter jet streaked across the sky above the town, 2 black figures had already jumped down from the sky. The Xia Dragonfinch? Seeing such an arrogant way of making an appearance, the armed police officer holding the rocket launcher was shocked. Although he did not know why the people who came to support the incident in the Western continent were not ability users from the imaginary agency, but people from the Xia Dragonfinch. However, since the ability users sent by the government had arrived, it meant that there was nothing for them to do. The ability user who caused trouble was not killed by a rocket launcher. He did not want to continue fighting with this kind of monster. Chapter 367. The 2 people who jumped down from the fighter were covered in a layer of silver-white battle suits. This was the latest nano armor developed by the RAS. After wearing it, not only did it greatly enhance the wearer's muscle endurance and agility, it was also resistant to all kinds of impact, bullet, magnetic, explosion, high temperature, and low temperature. Not only that, it was also equipped with thermal sensors, radar, thermal imaging, night vision, sonar, and other functions. It was a piece of cake to use it for tracking or stealth. Also, it was equipped with a smart medical device that could inject painkillers, hemostatic drugs, and even adrenaline when a wearer was injured, unconscious, or in need. In addition, there were a series of functions and weapons specially configured by different aptitude users, making this set of nanotechnology armor the true king of individual soldiers. Even if an ordinary person put it on, they would instantly become a mini superhuman, let alone now that they were wearing it on the hands of 2 dragon sparrow guards. The 2 of them fell from the sky, crashing into the street like 2 meteorites. The impact of their feet created a huge crater in the ground. One of them looked up, and a red light flashed across his silver-white mask. Jonah appeared in front of him in thermal imaging mode amidst the rubble. Found the target 120 meters in front of us. As he spoke, he took out something that looked like a flashlight from his belt. The next moment, a white light came out of the flashlight. It was a laminar plasma beam that was bound by electromagnetic force to create a lightsaber. This was a weapon that belonged to the Federation's Cobra unit, but after the RAS's modification, it became stronger and more durable. The lightsaber could fight at 20,000 degrees Celsius for 3 hours. A lightsaber formed at such a high temperature was enough to cut through most natural substances on Earth. One of the Dragon Sparrow guards who came to capture Jonah was Fong Haojia, who had just graduated not long ago. He pulled out the lightsaber at his waist and made a charging motion. "I'll be going first, Captain." The other Dragon Sparrow guard patted the dust off his body. No expression could be seen on his face because of the nano armor. "Be careful. The target has a freezing ability above rank 4. We can't rule out the possibility that he's a rank 5 ability user." "Understood." After saying this, Fong Haojia exerted force in both his legs. His strength, which had already far surpassed that of ordinary people, reached a superhuman level under the enhancement of the nanotechnology armor's impact on his joints. With a loud boom, he was like a cannonball, turning into a black line and charging toward Jonah. Fong Haojia's ability was called voidification. He could freely control his body and the matter he came into contact with to enter a state of voidification. In this state, his body and the matter he controlled would not be affected by the real world at all. They would enter a state similar to that of Ghost. Any matter would pass through his body and would not be able to affect him. And because he was unable to be affected by matter, his entire body would move forward with the inertia from before he became intangible. For example, those that were originally falling would continue to fall. Even if they landed on the ground, they would continue to fall through the ground until Fong Haojia dispelled his ethereal state. With a dash, his entire body, the nanotechnology armor, and the lightsaber entered a state of blurriness. Relying on the inertia from his previous dash, he charged toward Jonah. Along the way, he ignored all obstacles and passed through them like a ghost. Fong Haojia covered the distance of 120 meters in just a breath's time. In the blink of an eye, the lightsaber in his hand brought about a screen of light, slashing fiercely toward Jonah. Jonah had not expected that Fong Haojia's attack would be so strange and swift. Furthermore, there were no magical waves. Fong Haojia was a completely different creature from the warlock in Jonah's memories. He only had time to cry out in surprise, and his hands shot out waves of cold air toward Fong Haojia. However, Fong Haojia's body, after he became intangible, was like a ghost. The violent cold air did not have any effect on him at all. He passed through Jonah's body. Then with a turn, his intangible body turned into a physical body once again. Fong Haojia's legs stomped on the ground, and he came to a stop. Jonah cried out in agony, looking in horror at his right hand that had been chopped off by the lightsaber. When Fong Haojia passed through his body earlier, his intangible body turned into a physical body in an instant, and then it became intangible once again. It was at this moment that he had chopped off one of Jonah's hands. The defensive force field that could fend off rocket projectiles was unable to fend off the slash from the lightsaber. Fong Haojia's ability to turn intangible was also an extremely strange and powerful ability. The most important aspect of this ability was to grasp the timing between intangible and physical forms. Jonah was at a disadvantage because of the asymmetry in information. If he had been in his peak condition, he might not have been seriously injured by Fong Haojia with just one attack. Damn it, this damned aboriginal. If it wasn't for the fact that all my magical equipment had been confiscated by the guild, although Jonah was unwilling to admit it, he had to admit that these two aboriginals already had the ability to threaten his life. I'll escape first and deal with them after I've recuperated. At the thought of this, Jonah performed a healing spell with much difficulty. Then he soared into the sky, wanting to escape. At the same time, his body gradually dissipated into the air. It was the invisibility spell. However, his invisibility spell was only a simple distortion of light. It was unable to avoid the multiple surveillance from the nanotechnology armor. Just as he soared into the sky, another Dragon Sparrow guard appeared behind him. The dragon sparrow guard raised his right hand, and an intense purple light covered his fist completely. As he punched out, the purple light turned into a physical existence. It was like a purple shock wave that sent Jonah crashing to the ground. It was Hansen, who had been rescued by Li Onping from the underworld. His ability was to turn physical strength into physical attacks. After he punched out, he slowly descended from the sky. Then Fong Haojie dashed out toward Jonah, who had fallen to the ground. An earth-shattering, furious bellow rang out from Jonah's mouth. "All of you, scram!" Instantly, under the influence of a mysterious force, the water in the air turned into icicles that filled the sky. Each icicle was only the size of a thumb, but the cold air they contained was enough to freeze a small river into ice cubes. Right now, there were millions and millions of such water droplets in the air. In the Xia Long K base, the image had come to an end. Li Onping looked at Bai Xinghe and asked, "What happened after that?" "Hansen is seriously injured. However, with the protection of the nanotechnology armor and first aid, his life is not in danger," Bai Xinghe said. "Fong Haojie has the ability to turn invisible." He took advantage of the fact that Fong Haojie was in a weakened state and captured the target. However, although he managed to dodge the initial attack, he still suffered from serious frostbite when he turned into a physical form to attack. Li Onping nodded. "Take good care of them. Reward them as you deserve." "Yes." Li Onping raised his chin and pointed at Jonah on the screen. "What do you think? It seems to be some kind of explosive method." After the target used this move, the protective force field around him disappeared. Bai Xinghe operated the remote control in his hand, and the screen switched to a small room. Jonah was locked in the room. He was wearing the white prison uniform again, with a black collar around his neck. It was a special electric shock collar made by Xia Dragonfinch. It would monitor the heartbeat and brainwaves of the wearer. Once it exceeded a certain threshold, it would release an electric current. Once the wearer's brainwaves or heartbeat continued to rise, the power of the electric current would keep increasing until the wearer died or the heartbeat and brainwaves returned to normal. Such a collar was very useful to deal with the ability users of the field class, the parasitic class, and the bloodline class. It was because when they used their abilities, their heartbeats would be under great pressure or their brainwaves would be very active. Even when the other ability users were not using their abilities, they would be shocked when they overused their brains or fought. Right now, Jonah was wearing such a collar. For a sorcerer like him who did not practice magic and was not much different from an ordinary person, such a collar basically turned him into an ordinary person. Looking at the frustrated Jonah in the cell, Li Onping asked, "Did you get anything out of him?" Bai Xinghe shook his head. "Not yet. I want to ask, Your Majesty, can you read his mind?" "I can't." Li Onping replied straightforwardly. "Mental power does have the ability to read minds, but this guy's head has some kind of defense mechanism. Once it's invaded by a foreign mental power, it will self-destruct if it can't defend itself. Although I may not fail if I take action, it's not worth the risk. After all, he's already in our hands. There are too many ways to get information." Bai Xinghe nodded and said, "Then, Your Majesty, do we need to use more extreme methods? I mean, after we get all the information from him, do we still need him? It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive." Killing intent flashed in Li Onping's eyes. The murders he committed in the law country alone are enough for him to die 10 times over. "I understand." Inside the cell, 2 soldiers suddenly rushed in. One of them pressed down on Jonah, and the other pulled out his uninjured left hand. "What are you doing?" While Jonah was struggling, one of them injected a white reagent into his body through a syringe from his left hand. Then they left. "Poison?" Jonah sneered in his heart. "You've underestimated the willpower of a sorcerer. In order to pursue the power and knowledge of magic, we've gone through all the hardships on the road. Our willpower has been trained to be as tough as steel." However, the next moment, an intense pleasure that he had never felt before hit Jonah's body. At the same time, it was accompanied by all kinds of illusions. Jonah felt so good that he could fly. Chapter 368. A few days later, Jonah was lying on his bed and staring at the ceiling. Mucus was flowing out of his nostrils. His pupils were dilated, and his hair was standing on end. He was in a trance. The most uncomfortable thing was that something seemed to be missing from his body. He recalled the thing that the natives injected into him a few days ago. It was a very comfortable feeling. At this moment, 2 more soldiers opened the door of the cell and walked in. Behind them was Yang Guang, who was in charge of the interrogation. Since Lu Sheng went to take care of the school for ability users, and Bai Xinghe became the new leader of the Xia Dragonfinch, Yang Guang had become the second in command of the Xia Dragonfinch. This time, it was because Li Amping was very concerned about the guy who had walked out of the portal that he asked him to come in person. However, Jonah only glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and did not say anything. Yang Guang did not think much of it. According to Henry's confession, they had a general understanding of Jonah's personality and background. That was why they came up with the current plan. Yang Guang took out a syringe and played with it in his hand. When Jonah saw the syringe in Yang Guang's hand, he immediately sat up. He stared at the syringe and felt the turmoil in his body. He had a vague idea about what he had been injected with, but it was useless. Although he knew that it was definitely not a good thing to be injected with such a thing, the growing turmoil in his body made him tremble. He stared at the syringe that was rolling in Yang Guang's hand. "You want it?" Yang Guang looked at Jonah's silent face and smiled. "Do you know how to use it?" He shook his chin and instructed the soldier next to him, "Teach him how to inject it." The soldier next to him took the syringe and walked to Jonah, pulling out his left arm again. Jonah wanted to resist and struggle, but the syringe seemed to have some kind of magic that crushed the last bit of struggle in his heart. The white potion was injected into Jonah's body again. He groaned and lay down on the bed. A blurred look appeared in his eyes, and he felt as if he was flying. Yang Guang looked at Jonah, smiled, and left. Over the next few days, Jonah was injected with more and more medicine every day. 5 days later, the Xia Dragonfinch's people suddenly stopped injecting. Bang! Jonah slammed his head against the wall, but compared to the pain, the numbness and turbulence in his body made him feel worse. "Give it to me." With another bang, he slammed his head against the wall again. "Give me the medicine." Bang! "Give me the medicine." Behind the screen, Yang Guang asked the guard, "How long has he been like this?" "It's been more than 3 hours. Should we stop him?" Yang Guang smiled. "It's about time. Let's go and take a look." When Yang Guang walked into the cell again, Jonah stopped slamming his head against the wall and turned to look at him. At this moment, he looked a lot more down and out compared to when he first arrived on Earth. Not only were his eyes lifeless, but he also exuded a dispirited aura. Yang Guang raised his right hand, revealing a syringe in his palm. He said the same words he said a few days ago. "You want it? Give it to me." When he saw the syringe, Jonah roared and rushed forward, wanting to snatch the syringe from Yang Guang's hand. However, before he could get close, he was kicked back by the soldier next to Yang Guang, and he fell to the ground. Being kicked back by a mortal, if it were the old Jonah, he would have been furious, but now he just quickly raised his head, his face full of snot and tears. He looked at Yang Guang and said, "I beg you, give me the medicine." Yang Guang looked at Jonah coldly, stepped on him, and waved the syringe in his hand in front of him. "Scum, you want this, don't you? Just answer a few of my questions. What do you want to ask? Where are you from?" Jonah struggled for a while, but his inner strength was soon shattered by the turmoil in his body. "Holy Roland Empire." After saying this, Jonah's heart revealed a trace of sorrow. His pride as a mage seemed to have been torn to shreds at this moment, and a teardrop uncontrollably dripped from the corner of his eye onto the floor. Yang Guang smiled. "Very good. Next question. What is the magic you speak of?" "Codex Nation, under the frozen ocean." His psychic incarnation was building the underwater base here by himself. Although the psychic incarnation couldn't store electromagnetic force in its body and couldn't achieve the ability of the main body to reassemble matter, it still built very quickly with its superhuman speed and strength. In just a few days, the underwater base had basically been restored to its original state. However, this was only the beginning. Li Amping had originally planned to wait for some time and wait for the RAS to perfect some of the technology before building the outpost base on the opposite side of the portal, at the location of the Land of White. At least this way, the battlefield could be placed on the Land of White without endangering Earth. However, with Jonah's appearance now, this plan was disrupted. Liamping planned to spend some time to take a look at the Land of White, and then start building the outpost base near the portal on the opposite side of the portal. As for the underwater base, the location of the portal would be enclosed in the base, and then a warp gate would be built so that the human army could drive straight in. While he was building, Yang Guang delivered a report about Jonah. Sir, according to his testimony, he comes from a continent called Mondo. This continent has about 20 or so countries. This Jonah comes from an empire called Saint Roland, which is also one of the most powerful countries on the Mondo continent. Their level of civilization is about the same as our Middle Ages, and they mainly rely on animal power. I've already sent you the relevant information about the situation on the continent and the countries that Jonah knows. While speaking, Yang Guang clicked open a document on the computer. According to Jonah, he was originally on the run and accidentally entered a portal. That was how he arrived at the Land of White. Then, he entered another portal and arrived at Earth. Right now, he still thinks that he's on a different continent of the same world. In their world, there is a supernatural power called magic. Magic is divided into 10 levels, from the most basic illumination to the 10th level time stop. This document contains all of Jonah's known spells and their respective effects. Liamping glanced at it and heard Yang Guang continue. These magic, according to their classification, are divided into destruction, defense, transformation, arcane, prophecy, necromancy, life, and alchemy. There are a total of 8 major factions. In addition, there are supernatural powers called druids, warlocks, knights, and so on this continent. However, among all the supernatural powers, the power and influence of mages is still the greatest. Liamping nodded and asked, then how do their power levels compare to the ability users on our side? It's hard to say. Yang Guang frowned. There is too little information about mages. According to Jonah's performance and testimony, we can only make a rough judgment. Mages have a total of 4 levels. According to the difference in magic power and the number of spells they have mastered, they are divided into apprentices, inferior mages, superior mages, and sorcerers. Jonah is a superior mage. According to his performance, his destructive power is close to that of some 5th-level ability users and even surpasses it. However, his performance in other aspects is too poor. However, according to what he said, if he is fully equipped, his power will increase greatly. According to the information he provided, we made a rough estimate. Because mages have mastered different magic powers, their overall abilities are stronger than ability users. This is especially true for superior mages and sorcerers. When they are well prepared, their destructive power and escapability are very shocking. They are more difficult to deal with than most 5th-level ability users. Following that, Yang Guang continued to report for more than 3 hours. After all, there was too much information about a continent. The power of magic, the approximate number of sorcerers, the strength of each country, and the supernatural power of magic itself, and so on. This was when most of the information had already been received by Liamping through reading. It was a good thing that Jonah was a mage and had a lot of knowledge, which was why he could bring them so much information. Just as Liamping was seriously listening to Yang Guang's report on magic, the psychic energy incarnation had already rebuilt the entire underwater base. The portal that had originally stood on the seabed sand was now completely wrapped up by the base. The surrounding seawater had been completely removed, and the entire space was in a metal hall. More than 100 meters away from the portal, in the same metal hall, was the warp portal that Liamping had created. In addition, there were various engineering robots that were continuing to build various living facilities, monitoring devices, and firepower systems. Liamping's main body continued to listen to Yang Guang's report, while the psychic energy incarnation walked step by step towards the portal and then stretched its head out. It felt as if it had passed through some kind of membrane. What appeared in front of the psychic energy incarnation was a vast expanse of white land that stretched as far as the eye could see. The ground was completely made up of white sand, and a bright sun hung in the sky, emitting endless light and heat. However, these weren't what Li Yonping was most concerned about. What he was most concerned about was that directly in front of his head, about 300 meters away, there was a dark blue portal that stood there quietly. Recalling what Hygrim had said, Li Yonping frowned. So that's how it is. To think that a portal would naturally form at such a time and place. The two portals that stood quietly on the land of white symbolized two completely different and unfamiliar civilizations that were about to launch an unprecedentedly huge collision. Chapter 369. In an ordinary village in the Mondo continent. The originally quiet and peaceful village was now shrouded in flames that soared into the sky. Dozens of corpses of women and children were piled up in the center of the village square. Kadia grabbed a teenager and walked to Shang Tian, who was in front of the pile of corpses. He asked, "Is it him?" Shang Tian looked back and shook his head. Kadia laughed grimly and pierced the teenager's chest with the short sword in his hand. Then, he threw the corpse on the ground. At this moment, both Shang Tian and Kadia were wearing coarse clothes. They looked like they were in a medieval movie that was being played on a set. Apart from them, there were more than 10 men and women who were also wearing coarse clothes. They seemed to be searching for something in the village. Everyone in the village, from the residents to the chickens and ducks, had been killed by them. Night Beast suddenly shouted, "Found him!" Then he grabbed a teenager who looked to be in his teens and asked Xiang Shangtian, "Little Tian, is this him?" Shang Tian glanced at the young man and walked forward. Suddenly, he pulled open the young man's collar and saw a blue pendant hanging around his neck. He smiled, "It's him." Then, he nodded at the night beast beside him. Then, the night beast stabbed out with a finger that was imbued with psychic energy and pierced through the back of the night beast's head. "Okay, is this the country kid you wanted us to find?" Kadia said impatiently. "Just for us to kill him? Of course it's not that simple." Shang Tian said to a girl who was walking over, "Dong, use nanoworms to modify my body. Modify it to look like him." The beautiful girl with a cold face standing beside him was Dong, the Divine King's maid in the past. She later brought Tian Haowen to Tyrol. At this moment, she still looked the same as before. However, she had changed into a coarse dress like a medieval woman. After hearing Shang Tian's words, she looked at the teenager's corpse on the ground and then at Shang Tian. "Your body sizes are too different. If you use nanoworms, I know, so I don't want to disguise myself. I want to modify. Every part of my body will be modulated to look like him." Shang Tian looked at Dong and said, "Not only can I impersonate him, but I can also strengthen my physique in all aspects. I know that with your technology, you can do it." Dong frowned and said, "Give me 3 days. I will set up a simple operating room near here. I'll help you with the reconstruction surgery." "Thanks." Shang Tian smiled. "Also, I want to strengthen my muscles and bones and simulate the nerve plexus. This will be helpful for my magic practice." Dong looked at him strangely, as if she hadn't expected him to know so much about her technology. Then, Shang Tian looked at the other men and women around him and said, "Now that the matter here is over, let's follow the plan." In the next moment, the dozen or so men and women scattered in all directions. They followed Shang Tian's instructions and went to ancient ruins, battlefields, and secret realms in the Mondo continent to collect all kinds of secret treasures, divine artifacts, and lost spells. They also gathered some powerful creatures through information for Shang Tian. An unprecedented plundering of the Mondo continent was about to begin. Shang Tian, Kadia, the Night Beast, and Dong would use their modified bodies to impersonate a young man. They would meet his father, who even he didn't know about, the most powerful individual on the Mondo continent, the demigod Dionysus. Shang Tian would replace this young man, who would shock the Mondo continent in the future. After meeting Dionysus, he would receive unprecedented resources and enter a period of rapid growth. He would also have the right to speak in all the countries on the Mondo continent. On the other side, after Li Onping discovered the existence of the magic world, the entire human society was mobilized. The leaders of the various countries had already been informed by Li Onping of the existence of the demons and the White Land. Now, the so-called magic world had appeared. Therefore, all kinds of information about the magic world were sent to their hands. Very soon, they came up with a series of plans and waited for Li Onping's choice. Li Onping didn't accept the suggestions of those who tried to form an alliance or send troops to conquer the magic world. He planned to build human outposts in the White Land and the bottom of the sea. At the same time, he chose a dozen or so people to form an expedition team and infiltrate the magic world to see what the situation was like. For example, the environment, whether ordinary humans could survive there, and whether the structure of the humans there was different from that of humans on Earth. He also wanted to know the strength of the magic world's army, the relationship between the various countries, and so on. He couldn't just listen to Jonah's side of the story. After all, he was just one person. There was a lot of information that he didn't know, or what he knew might be wrong. Faced with a foreign world and a foreign civilization, Li Onping planned to be more cautious. Therefore, he planned to send out an expedition team and gather an army to be on standby. With the existence of the Space Warp Gate, as long as the army was gathered, they could pass through the Space Warp Gate and reach the Mondo continent at any time. In the palace's study, the pale-faced Jonah was brought in by Yang Wang. Li Onping glanced at him and said to Xia Laikong, "That's all for the human armed forces. Be on standby and be ready to attack." "I understand." Xia Laikong nodded and left the study. Before he left, he glanced at Jonah. Obviously, he was very curious about this legendary mage. As Li Onping's subordinates, the human armed forces were the third largest ability user organization after the Xia Dragonfinch and the Imaginary Service. They were mainly prepared for large-scale wars. Most of them were domain-type ability users. The goal of their training was also mainly lethality and coordination. In terms of one-on-one combat and small-scale group battles, they might not be as good as the Xia Dragonfinch and the Imaginary Service. However, once they cooperated with the army and fought a battle of more than 10,000 people, they would be far more useful than the latter two. After all, the human armed forces' weapons were already very powerful. Now, under the lead of the RAS and Li Onping, their weapons were becoming more and more advanced. In the face of such an army, even a rank 5 ability user would not be able to completely ignore it. Yang Wang bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, he is Jonah." Jonah glanced at Li Onping. The latter looked like a normal person. Compared to the king in front of him, the incredible skyscrapers he saw along the way attracted his attention more. Li Onping didn't mind Jonah's rudeness. He waved his hand and said to Yang Wang, "All right, you can go first. I want to talk to him alone." Jonah looked at Li Onping and Yang Wang strangely. He didn't expect them to dare to talk to him alone. He quickly thought of the collar around his neck and understood. Right now, as long as he had the slightest intention to attack or release magic, the electric current released from his neck would knock him out. On the other side, Li Onping looked at the silent Jonah and said, "I called you over this time mainly because I want to see magic." "Oh, right." Li Onping looked at the collar around Jonah's neck and said, "You can't release magic with this thing, right?" With a snap of his fingers, the collar broke into two and fell to the ground. "All right, just cast a spell for me to see." Jonah looked at Li Onping in disbelief. Then he touched his neck. The collar that had kept him captive like a puppy had actually disappeared just like that. In the next moment, he looked at Li Onping with a crazed expression on his face. Those traces of savagery made him look like a demon from hell. He first casually cast an illumination spell. A spot of light appeared in his palm, and his body indeed didn't receive any electric shocks. He turned his head and looked at Li Onping. Mortal, you made the stupidest decision of your life." In the next moment, a sudden burst of cold air, carrying the resentment that Jonah had accumulated during this period of time, rushed fiercely toward Li Onping. Chapter 370. Feeling the gentle body in his arms, Li Onping scanned it with his mind force field. He was already clear about Li Qian's current physical condition. Although Li Qian didn't train as hard as Jin Guang and Yin Bei, with the resources from the Xia Dragonfinch, such as the Immortality Potion, Function Enhancer, and sort of 10 strikes, she had reached the 3rd level. Li Yonping thought for a bit and rubbed Li Qian's back. She was like a kitten, making light noises. Li Yonping whispered in Li Qian's ear, Lu Feng will go with the expedition team to the Mondo continent to collect information. After he leaves, you can take over the work of the intelligence department for him. But I've never done such a thing, Li Qian said without confidence. Although her position in the Xia Dragonfinch was very high, she had never been a leader with real power. She only used her ability to monitor others. Li Yonping stroked Li Qian's hair and looked at her face. He said slowly, you are the person I trust the most. From now on, be my eyes and ears. After hearing Li Yonping's words, Li Qian's heart was filled with excitement. She nodded firmly and said, okay. The current intelligence department had been integrated by Momo's central computer. Everything had a detailed set of rules and regulations. The department's dependence on the quality of the leader had been minimized. The most important thing was the degree of loyalty. Moreover, Li Yonping knew that Li Qian didn't have much talent in developing abilities or fighting. Being in charge of intelligence was more suitable for her. He smiled and said, then from today onwards, you can also live in the palace. There's a warp gate that leads directly to the base. It's very convenient. Okay, I'll listen to you. Li Qian lowered her head and felt her cheeks become hot. Li Yonping let go of Li Qian and snapped his fingers. A spark of electricity appeared on his fingertips. As the electromagnetic signal was transmitted, Xiao Shuesu and the others who were near the study received the news. When they walked in, Li Yonping said, arrange a room for Li Qian. She will live in the palace from today onwards. Xiao Shuesu and the others looked at Li Qian with jealousy in their eyes. Although they had been in charge of taking care of Li Yonping's daily life in the palace, they were his personal maids and personal secretaries. However, as Li Yonping grew stronger and stronger, his body structure became more and more different from that of a human. He didn't need to eat or sleep anymore. His brain's memory and calculation ability were better than a computer. Xiao Shuesu and the others rarely talked to Li Yonping. After Li Qian left, Haigrim's head slowly poked out from under the table. He looked at Li Yonping with bad intentions and said, you're lying to this female? Li Yonping looked at Haigrim. With just a glance, Haigrim's head seemed to have been hit hard. He screamed and fell to the ground. A huge crack appeared on his forehead. From today onwards, other than not appearing in front of others, you are not allowed to say a word without my orders. Just like that, Li Qian stayed in the palace and slowly took over the work of the intelligence department from Lu Feng. On the other hand, the humans had also begun their preparations for the world of magic. The Xia Dragonfinch's hospital ward. With a slap, Hansen withdrew his hand in embarrassment. The nurse scolded him for being a hooligan and left immediately. Feng Haojia turned his head and pretended he didn't know this person. Hansen quickly threw the awkwardness to the back of his mind and said to Feng Haojia, Haojia, we're really lucky this time. I heard that the VIP wards here are only for the higher-ups. This time, not only did we get a raise and a promotion, we didn't die. How lucky is that? Captain, Feng Haojia looked at Hansen. There was still a hint of depression in his eyes. Hansen smiled and said to Feng Haojia, Haojia, you rarely fail, right? Academy City's golden generation, first place in the graduation exam. Hansen said calmly, before you came, there were a lot of rumors about you. Is that so? Hearing Hansen say this, Feng Haojia suddenly felt a little shy. But you have to remember, compared to success, being able to accept failure is more important. Because a person can't always succeed. He will always fail. Plus, your performance this time was already very good, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, Feng Haojia nodded. At this moment, the door of the ward was opened. Wang Ku, who had been following Zhuo Mai, walked in wearing the Xia Dragonfinch's uniform. Behind him, there was a dragon sparrow guard holding something in his hand. You're Feng Haojia, right? Wang Ku saluted Feng Haojia and said with a serious face, hello, from now on, You have been incorporated into the Pan-Continent Alliance, the SOM Special Task Force. The specific written notice will be sent to your mailbox in a moment. I'm here to inform you that you will report to the Royal Academy of Sciences in New Danyang in 7 days. Also, Wang Ke's face showed a hint of envy. In 3 days, you will report to the palace. Fang Haojie was stunned. He still didn't understand the situation. SOM Special Task Force? Don't worry, it's a good thing. Wang Ke glanced at Fang Haojie and left, leaving Hansen and Fang Haojie in the ward a loss, wondering what this so-called SOM Special Task Force was for. Royal Academy of Sciences, Basement 13. Kevin returned to his lounge and took out his phone. Ever since Li Onping rescued him from the underworld, he first joined Xia Dragonfinch. Later, because of his outstanding medical skills, he was recruited by Shi Wen to work at the Royal Academy of Sciences. He glanced at the number on his phone and dialed it back. Hello, Hansen. You looking for me? Yes, I have something to ask you. Do you know about the SOM Special Task Force? I heard that it has something to do with the Royal Academy of Sciences. Yes. Kevin turned his head and looked at the notice on his desk. I've been transferred in as a medical officer. What? Hansen asked, what is that thing? One of my subordinates was transferred in as well. I've asked the leader. The leader, Kevin referred to as naturally Emma, who led everyone in the underworld. Ever since they left the underworld, these survivors of the underworld still kept in contact with each other. They were basically a faction now. It should be a spy from another world. The rest is confidential. I can't tell you with my authority. Oh, right. Your subordinate is Fang Haojie? What's wrong? Do you know him? The guy named by His Majesty personally. He's famous now. Inside the underground training room, Golden Light still had his blonde hair and blue eyes, but his hair seemed to be longer than before. His muscles were also thicker than before. Right now, he was shirtless and sweating profusely in front of a huge metal wall. The fist wrapped in golden psychic energy fell like a meteorite and hit the metal panel, making loud, banging noises. This metal panel was made from the leftover adamantium from the sword of Tatsuka. It wasn't really made, but the adamantium that Li Onping kept after making 108 sword of Tatsuka was stored together in this way. Only this kind of metal could withstand Golden Light's attack so easily without any damage. The blue-haired girl looked at Golden Light with admiration. The sword of Tatsuka in her hand had been activated to the strongest gravity she could control. Under such a high-gravity environment, Golden Light could still move as freely as usual. Especially since the last time he reached the limit, she found that Golden Light had never left the transformation state. Obviously, his strength had reached an unfathomable level. At this moment, Golden Light suddenly stopped. He let out a deep breath and picked up a towel on the ground to wipe his sweat. Just a few seconds after he stopped training, the metal door of the training room opened. Lu Feng walked in with his hands behind his back and a smile on his face. He glanced at Golden Light's body and sighed. What a terrifying talent. Golden Light exhaled and asked directly, "What's the matter?" Lu Feng stretched out his hand, and a notice fell into Golden Light's hand. SOM Special Operations Team, report in 7 days. Special Operations Team? Golden Light frowned. What do you do? You've heard about the magic world, right? Lu Feng smiled. We're just going there to collect information and see if there are any strong people or things worth paying attention to. I heard that the sorcerers there are more difficult to deal with than level 5 ability users. Yes, there is such a saying. Seeing that Golden Light didn't mean anything, Lu Feng turned and left. Halfway through, he suddenly remembered something. Oh, right, in 3 days, His Majesty wants you to go to the palace to see him. Got it. Just after Lu Feng left, Golden Light looked at the adamantium on the wall and murmured, "Magic." The next moment, the golden chi burst out like a volcanic eruption. The dazzling golden light filled the entire training room, making the blue-haired girl unable to open her eyes. Accompanied by an earth-shattering noise, the ground under her feet seemed to have experienced a magnitude 10 earthquake. The terrible air wave blew her whole body to the wall. When everything disappeared, she opened her eyes again. She couldn't see any adamantium, only a bottomless hole in the wall. Even if the adamantium was still intact, it had been bombarded to the depths of the ground where it was difficult to see with the naked eye. Chapter 371. Yin Bei followed behind Xiao Shuesu and slowly walked towards the palace's study. At this moment, compared to before, he seemed to have become more reserved and cold. Compared to his original sharpness, he gave off the feeling that he was no different from an ordinary passerby. It was as if even one's gaze could not stay on him, as if it was directly absorbed. He raised his head and looked around. The palace's security seemed to be tighter than before. In just a short 10 minutes, Yin Bei had already sensed the aura of at least 10 level 4 ability users. Recently, he did not know whether it was because of the establishment of the academy or the changes in the Earth's environment, but Yin Bei felt that there seemed to be more and more ability users. Level 4 ability users that were rarely seen in the past could now be seen frequently in the palace. It seems that after the first level 5 ability user was born, the growth rate of ability users has gradually increased. At this moment, Xiao Shuesu's footsteps stopped. She turned around and said, "His Majesty is waiting for you in front." Yin Bei nodded. He originally wanted to ask Xiao Shuesu if Li Anping had been staying in the study and reading recently. But after thinking about it, he decided not to. Li Anping would definitely be able to hear what he said. Although he just wanted to ask casually, when he thought about how Li Anping would just listen like that, it was not too good. After thinking about it, Yin Bei pushed open the door of the study and walked in. In the study, he could see 3 people directly. Li Anping was sitting behind the desk and reading a book. Jing Guang stood by the window and kept looking outside. Only when Yin Bei came in did he turn around to look at him. There was also a young man that Yin Bei did not know. He was sitting upright on the chair and looked very nervous. After Yin Bei came in, Li Anping raised his head and looked at the 3 of them. He said, "All right, everyone is here. Let's begin." Jing Guang also walked over when he heard that. He stood in front of Li Anping with Yin Bei and Feng Haojie. After looking at the 3 of them, Li Anping paused and said, "The 3 of you have excellent potential. It's a rare opportunity for you to join the special operations team this time, but it's also very dangerous." Yin Bei and Jing Guang heard that and glanced at Feng Haojie. From his psychic energy, he seemed to be a level 4 ability user. Yet, Li Anping personally mentioned that he had high potential. Yin Bei suddenly remembered a recent rumor. "Feng Haojie, I wonder if the so-called void form can be hit by my collapse attack." Thinking about this, he looked at Jing Guang, who had been in his transformed state since he entered. As expected, he has also become stronger. Jing Guang glanced at Feng Haojie and turned his head away. His eyes seemed to be very pure, unlike Yin Bei's. This was also related to their different training methods during this period of time. Yin Bei faced all kinds of powerful level 5 ability users in his dream time and time again. He carefully tested the opponent's fighting style, understood the opponent's state after combining their body and ability, and collected the information that the opponent unintentionally revealed. These were all very important. Jing Guang's training did not think so much. He just kept increasing the pressure on himself, pushing his limits time and time again, pushing his strength to the limit. When Feng Haojie heard Li Anping announce his name, a trace of excitement flashed in his eyes. He felt his blood boiling. Li Anping, who was sitting behind the desk, did not care about what they thought. He just continued, "Because of this, I called you guys here today to give you guys some insurance." At this point, Li Anping took out a silver-white ring from the drawer of the desk and threw it to Feng Haojie. "You know the sword of Tatsuka, right? This is red lightning." Feng Haojie took the ring, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Of course, he had heard of the 108 Ten-Fist swords. He had always dreamed of having one. He did not expect to not only meet Li Anping today, but also get the Ten-Fist sword that he had always dreamed of. While he was excited, Li Anping's voice came into his ears. The red lightning he released can basically break down most substances into their molecular state. It's considered a level 5 ability. It can make up for your void ability and lack of destructive power. But this is for you to save your life. Don't rely on him too much. Train your ability more. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As Feng Haojie spoke, there seemed to be a fire burning in his eyes. It was as if he was going to burn up. Yin Bei and Jin Guang did not have any special reaction. They each had a level 5 10-fist sword, which was a steel spear and a strength bracer. They were just a little surprised that Feng Haojie got red lightning. Li Yonping did not care about them. He continued, "Other than that, I'll give each of you one last insurance." As he spoke, he stretched out a finger on his right hand. A drop of red blood flowed out from his fingertip. Then, the drop of blood flew into the air and flew towards Jin Guang. Then, the second drop of blood and the third drop of blood flew towards their foreheads with a red line. Jin Guang and the other two only felt a slight chill on their foreheads. The blood had completely seeped into their bodies. At the same time, Li Yonping's voice slowly rang in their ears. "This drop of blood contains a simple consciousness algorithm that I've created. When it detects that your vital signs are far lower than normal, it will be activated. After it's activated, it will extract the vacuum zero-point energy around you and change the electronic structure of atoms and molecules according to the surrounding environment to help you." Speaking of this, Li Yonping looked at the three in front of him. Jin Guang and Yin Bei were basically confused. Of the two of them, one had a high school diploma, while the other did not even have one. As for Feng Haojie, he was slightly better as he graduated from Academy City, but he did not seem to understand much either. "The three of you, don't bury yourself in training all day. Read more books." Li Yonping shook his head and continued, "In short, after you're beaten half to death, you'll be revived with full health and full mana. Then, you'll be able to attack and defend." Now, the three of them understood. Jin Guang nodded. "So, with the eternal shield?" Yin Bei denied. "No, it's even more powerful than that. This will be even stronger after revival." "It can't be revived, right?" Feng Haojie whispered. "It can only be used when you're heavily injured." Li Yonping sighed and continued, "Also, you have to remember that this thing consumes a lot of my energy. It's not something that can be made casually. Don't use it recklessly. During the operation, you'll be the core force. Use your strength well to protect the others in the team." Seeing the three of them nod, he continued, "One last reminder. Once the consciousness algorithm that I wrote confirms that there's no hope for you to survive, in order to prevent you from being captured alive, it will directly activate the self-destruct program and turn you into an antimatter bomb." Li Yonping's lips curled into a cruel smile. "So be careful. Don't accidentally die." The three of them tensed up and said in a serious tone, "Yes, sir." Not long after the three of them left, Lu Feng also walked into the study to meet Li Yonping. As the long-term head of the intelligence department, he was the person in charge of this special operation team. Even Jin Guang, Yin Bei, and Feng Haojie had to listen to his orders when they were on the Mondo continent. Aside from that, this was an inspection trip. The main purpose was to collect information on the Mondo continent. Therefore, other than ability users like Jin Guang, Yin Bei, and Feng Haojie, many physicists, chemists, sociologists, biologists, and other researchers will be brought along to collect all kinds of local information. This would provide the necessary theoretical and data support for the Pan-Continent Alliance and Li Yonping's future decisions. After all, they were two completely different worlds. They weren't even sure if Earth and the Mondo continent were in the same universe. In this case, any small change in the universe's parameters could have a huge impact on humans, not to mention the various biological, climate, and environmental factors. In fact, Li Yonping had already sent people to collect all the things that Jonah had touched. Just on them alone, they found more than 23 types of microorganisms that didn't exist on Earth. As he spoke, Li Yonping gave Lu Feng 2 Tatsuka swords to protect him. With the special equipment provided by the RAS as well, Li Yonping believed that the inspection team should be safe as long as they didn't cause any trouble. After basically telling him everything he wanted to tell him, Li Yonping asked, "How's Li Qian? Can she take over after you leave?" Lu Feng answered carefully, "It shouldn't be a problem. Miss Li Qian is very smart, and she has been in the intelligence department for more than 2 years. She knows the entire process." "That's good." Li Yonping closed his eyes and waved a hand. "Let's go. You'll be in charge of the inspection team's training starting next week." I'll give you 2 weeks at most. The moment Li Onping closed his eyes, his attention was focused on his Qi avatar. The avatar was standing on the white ground. Around him were dozens of workers who were dressed like spacesuits. They were either testing environmental data or controlling engineering robots to build an outpost around the portal. Li Onping's psychic energy incarnation stood in the middle of the two portals, in charge of guarding them. On the other hand, in front of the portal that led to the Mondo continent, a crawler-type AI robot was slowly moving toward it. Before the special task force entered, the staff here would use the robot to do a simple search of the Mondo continent's portal. Chapter 372. New Dongyang, East 23rd District. This was a large area that looked like a primeval forest. Because of the density of monsters, even some bounty hunters who specialized in finding rare monsters were not willing to come here. But today, this desolate place welcomed a group of guests. Lu Feng walked to the front, and behind him, there were a total of 10 men and women. Among them, there were yellow, white, and black people. It seemed that many races had gathered. In addition to Yin Bei, Jing Guang, and Feng Haojie, there were also Tony Abel and Brian from the Federation, as well as people from Ice Fortress, Southern Border, and Law Nation. They were all elites that the Xia Dragonfinch and the Imaginary Agency had found from all over the Earth. Under the leadership of Lu Feng, they would be responsible for exploring the other world and protecting the accompanying scientists. Lu Feng walked to the front and said, "We don't have much time. We only have about a week or so. In this week, we will organize a field training like this every morning, and in the afternoon, we will study the general knowledge of the magic world. At night, you will take turns fighting Mage Jonah." In addition to what Lu Feng said, the language part would be solved by Jonah using language proficiency. In addition, they also had to receive a series of vaccines urgently developed by the Royal Academy of Sciences to help fight against the various germs that the robots had detected on the other side of the portal. In addition, there were all kinds of training, which were compressed by Lu Feng into a week. After a week, they would step into the portal and begin the inspection of the Mondo continent. They would decide whether the Earth's attitude towards the Mondo continent would be friendly, hostile, or something else. 7 days later, before the inspection team was about to enter the Mondo continent through the portal. In the northernmost part of the Mondo continent, in the Cloud Courtyard, which was located at the highest peak of the continent, a unique meeting was also going on. The 5 most powerful countries on the Mondo continent, including the Holy Roland Empire, had all sent their representatives. There was only one person on the continent who could summon the representatives of these 5 powerful countries in just a few days. He was the demigod Dionysus, who was also the spiritual leader of all the mages in the Mage Guild. He represented the most powerful man in the world. Have you heard? The bloodline left behind by His Excellency Dionysus before he became a sorcerer. Yes, it's said to be a boy named Adam. This meeting seems to be related to him. Are you serious? Do you think this boy don't talk nonsense? It's said that his bloodline has been tested, and he does indeed have the bloodline of a demigod. Just as the representatives of the 5 countries were whispering to each other, a young man who looked to be in his teens walked in. He looked very handsome and wore a gray robe. The robe looked very ordinary and inconspicuous, but in the eyes of the representatives of the 5 nations, it was a shocking piece of information. It's actually the shadow robe. His Excellency Dionysus actually bestowed this to him. Although Dionysus didn't participate in this meeting, the robe that was draped on Adam's body was enough to make the people who were originally careless stop being frivolous. They looked at Adam with eyes full of jealousy, surprise, and envy. Adam ignored the emotions of the people and walked directly to the main seat of the conference table. Behind him were Kadia and the Night Beast, who had changed into mage attire and had their heads covered in cloaks. Looking at the scrutinizing, questioning, and flattering gazes of the people, Adam, or rather Shang Tian, smiled gently, as if he couldn't feel the pressure contained in those gazes at all. He coughed softly and said, "Everyone, I've called all of you here this time mainly because in the near future, there will be a huge disaster in the entire Mondo continent. This disaster is so terrifying that it's enough to overturn the countries that you're in. No, not only that, it will even destroy the glory of mages and destroy all the humans in the entire Mondo continent. Adam's words made everyone feel that he was exaggerating things just to scare them. Those who were sent to participate in the meeting were all sly old foxes in interpersonal relationships and politics, not to mention their attainments in magic. Hence, it was impossible for Adam's pyramid scheme to move them. However, he didn't mind. Seeing that everyone was silent, he continued, "At the west end of the continent, in the Basin, a gate to hell has been opened. Countless demons will surge out from that gate. They have great power, but they're completely immersed in endless desires. Their appearance is destined to cause a bloodbath on the Mondo continent." Adam's words immediately caused everyone to whisper to each other. Demons? Hell? Mr. Adam, are you sure you're not joking? Demons that can overturn the entire continent? Do they also have great power like Sir Demigod? The magic civilization on the Mondo continent had developed for countless years. Although it was limited by the number of mages, it lacked the popularity brought about by science on Earth. However, through the development of magic, most mages had long confirmed that the so-called gods, heaven, demons, and hell were just tools made up by religions to control believers. It could be said that in the entire Mondo continent, as long as one was a low-rank mage or above, as well as most of the upper-class nobles, they were all downright atheists. They firmly believed in the power of magic. As for Dionysus' title as a demigod, it was purely out of respect for his power. Magic was the biggest religion in the entire Mondo continent. Adam was also deeply aware of this, so he wasn't surprised by everyone's doubts. Instead, he extended his hand and placed his palm in front of Kadia. Under everyone's surprised gaze, a pure white longsword was placed in Adam's hand. This is Holy Sword Cardinus. How is this possible? This holy sword should have gone missing in the final Holy War. In the historical records of the Mondo continent, Holy Sword Cardinus was created more than 4,000 years ago by the first emperor who unified the entire country, Odysseus, who was known as the Holy King. He gathered a total of 200 top-notch magic shooters at that time to create this holy sword, hoping to pass down the legacy of this sword so that his dynasty would never decline. Unfortunately, even though he had the most powerful power, the country he created eventually fell apart due to internal strife. Holy Sword Cardinus also went missing after that. Legend had it that this holy sword had all kinds of incredible power. Even an ordinary person with a holy sword could have the power to destroy a city with one blow. It was considered the strongest magic conductor in the entire Mondo continent. There is even a rumor about Holy Sword Cardinus. When the holy sword appears again, the Mondo continent will also welcome the unification of the Mondo continent once again. As a mage murmured this sentence, the holy sword in Adam's hand glowed with a milky white light, as if it was enveloping Adam's entire body. Of course, the mages present couldn't completely believe the rumor of the continent being unified once again, but in the face of Holy Sword Cardinus, this existence known as the strongest magic conductor, they still lost their minds for a moment. Everyone, the Holy Sword has appeared because the entire continent is about to welcome an unprecedented disaster. If you don't want to believe it, then after returning, you can send people to the Basin to look for the portal that sends demons. Faced with the shadow robe bestowed by the demigod and the holy sword in Adam's hand, the people present didn't seem to reject the so-called demons as much. "Sir, may I ask what kind of existence the demons you speak of are?" Adam withdrew the holy sword and continued. "They have similar appearances to humans, but they are more evil and greedy. They don't have the power of magic, but they have another kind of power called technology and superpowers." Adam clapped his hands, and the servant beside him immediately brought up a pistol. "This is the weapon I seized from them. They call it pistol." Adam said to a magic shooter among the representatives, "Sir Lawrence, I'll use this pistol to attack you to demonstrate its prowess." "Come on," Lawrence said casually. "But how are you going to use it to attack? I can't see any part of his body that can be used to attack others. Are you going to throw it at me?" Lawrence's words brought about a series of soft laughter. But in the next moment, a gunshot rang out, interrupting everyone's laughter. Lawrence frowned and used Mage's hand to pick up the bullet that had been distorted and deformed from the ground. He asked curiously, "Oh, he attacks by spraying these metal particles?" "Yes. This kind of weapon can be mass-produced on the demon's side. Their greatest advantage is their quantity." Lawrence shook his head. With this kind of attack power, ordinary superior mages wouldn't be able to break through the defensive force field even if they let him shoot for an entire day. Night Beast couldn't help but say, "But this is only the most basic weapon. They have many more powerful weapons called tanks and missiles. They can all be mass-produced. If superior mages can't do it, then just send a few magic shooters." This sentence seemed to represent the thoughts of all the mages present. Most of them didn't seem to care about the so-called technological weapons. In their eyes, the pistol that Adam had shown could only be considered as an interesting toy. But the superpowers that Adam had mentioned were considered to be the abilities of warlocks and were slightly valued. We've already understood the power of the demons. Then may I ask what Sir Demigod's plans are? One of the representatives asked the question that everyone present wanted to ask the most. Compared to the illusory demons that didn't even have magic, the will of the demigod was more important to them. It was like how people in developed countries viewed tribes in the primitive forests. Demons that didn't know magic were ignorant wild beasts in their eyes, even if these wild beasts had mastered some special techniques. Father has made new discoveries in magic recently, and has devoted himself wholeheartedly to his research. Even I can't go to the laboratory to look for him. But he said earlier that if anyone on the continent is able to capture a demon, he will personally expend magic power to permanently cast a level 7 spell on that warrior. Before Adam finished his words, a strange glow appeared in everyone's eyes. Compared to the demons that didn't have magic abilities, the magic cast by the demigod clearly attracted their attention more. Immediately, more than half of the representatives expressed that they would send the army and mages to capture the demons. Looking at the backs of these representatives as they passed through the teleportation portal and slowly left, the corners of Adam's mouth curled up into a smile. Beside him, Night Beast was somewhat worried. Adam, is this okay? Why don't you show them the more powerful weapons from Earth? They'll be at a disadvantage if they underestimate the enemy so much. That's exactly what I want them to be, at a disadvantage. Adam laughed softly. Uncle Knight, what do you think is the biggest difference between the magic world and Earth? Is it the two different civilizations of magic and technology? No, it's the knowledge of the world. People on Earth use technology to understand the world, but the people here rely on magic to understand the world. They won't take technology seriously before they pay a sufficient price. Thousands of years of history of using magic to conquer nature will give them a unique pride when facing Earth's army. People on Earth who haven't mastered magic are no different from primitive people in their eyes now. Adam turned his head and walked to the edge of the cloud courtyard. Looking at the continent of Mondo under his feet, he said slowly, "If they realize the power of Earth too early, they won't fight so easily. What we need to do is let the blood and hatred continue to escalate before they attempt to negotiate with Earth. We'll drag Li Onping and Xia Dragonfinch into the vortex of this war." Next to him, Cutius said, "I'm not interested in war, but are you sure there's no problem with Dionysus? Let's not talk about your identity first. I don't think he fully approves of you. This guy's talent alone is too terrifying. It's hard to imagine that he can improve his power to such a level with only magic. You just gave him so much scientific information on Earth so easily. Aren't you afraid of raising a tiger?" Adam shook his head. "As I said, it's a matter of perception. Dionysus' talent is indeed terrifying. If he was born on Earth, he might have a chance to reach the ultimate level. However, his experience in the world of magic has limited his vision. To change this perception, he needs time, not talent. During this time, he'll be our best weapon to resist Li Onping." Adam raised his hands and made a hugging gesture toward the boundless land below the mountain. It looked like he wanted to hug the entire continent of Mondo. Liamping, can you feel it? Your sinful life will be ended by me with my own hands. At the same time, Lu Feng and the others had already put on their equipment in the underwater base. On the surface, they were all wearing coarse linen clothes. However, under these medieval clothes, they were all wearing the latest nano armor created by the Royal Academy of Sciences. They were also hidden by optical camouflage. Lu Feng looked back at everyone. Let's go. In the next moment, the group of 18 people, including 11 ability users and 7 members of the Royal Academy of Sciences, passed through the portal. After arriving at the Land of White, they would pass through the portal of Mondo and begin this adventure in the world of magic. Chapter 373. Tony Abel stepped through the portal, and what appeared in front of him was an endless forest. According to Jonah's information, this was the west of the Mondo continent, known as the Umla Basin. The air he inhaled through his nose felt a little moist, just as the scientists had predicted before they set off. This should be a continental basin created by the movement of the Earth's crust, so the air was very moist. Tony looked up at the sky and could only see a giant fireball burning slowly in the sky. According to the robot's detection, the Mondo continent here was the same as Earth in every solar system. However, astronomers had yet to find any celestial bodies that humans were familiar with in the night sky. Maybe this place was too far away from Earth, or maybe this place was in a different universe than Earth. However, Tony didn't care about that. He only knew that the gravity and air composition here were suitable for ordinary people to live. Just as Tony was stunned, a golden-haired man in front of him greeted him. "Hey, Tony, come help me set up the barracks." The golden-haired man was more than 2 meters tall and looked like a standing polar bear. Every time he spoke, his voice sounded like he was wearing a loudspeaker. This golden-haired man was called Ivan, and he was from the Ice Fortress Canuvizin family. Before Li Anping ascended to the throne, he had sent the head of the Ice Fortress Splinter Group, Sergei, to Tianjing. He was also one of the Ice Fortress's elite ability users. However, in Adam's eyes, Ivan was more like a big bear that could walk upright, although their bloodline ability, werewolf form, had nothing to do with bears. As someone who had been possessed by Li Anping's doppelganger, Tony Abel's combat power was naturally at the elite level. In particular, his experience of being possessed had aroused the curiosity and envy of countless people. Ivan was naturally one of them, and when the team was first formed, he expressed full goodwill to Tony. Tony took the components from Ivan and began to set up the camp. This newly developed component had the ability to self-expand. As long as the user chose the program in advance, the components could self-expand and connect to complete the construction of the camp. At the side, the others were busy with their own tasks. They were either building camps or exploring the surrounding environment. Brian, who came from the Federation together with Tony, had the Wolf of Flame ability. He was the bloodline ability user who had once fought against Hygram and Fabrizio with Tony. Right now, he was adjusting a gigantic sphere in front of him. This was a simple satellite they had brought with them. There were more than 20 similar satellites on the other side of the portal, and they would be launched one after another to explore the planet that the RAS had named Planet Magic. 2 hours later, with the help of superpowers and advanced technology, the entire camp was quickly set up. Most of the aptitude users stayed in the camp, except for Yin Bei, who left alone to explore the entire Umla Basin. Other scientists began to conduct various planned physical and chemical experiments in simple laboratories to determine the differences between this world and Earth. There were also scientists who were collecting soil, plant, and animal specimens. Of course, this often required the assistance of ability users. According to the Pan-Continent Alliance's plan, they would stay near the portal for about 3 days. 3 days later, they would start their own missions. Since the people of the Mondo continent looked more like white people, Jingguang shape-shifted, Lu Feng shape-shifted, and a group of white people would find a way to blend into the local society of the Mondo continent. By establishing certain social relations on the Mondo continent, they would be able to obtain the information the Pan-Continent Alliance needed. On the other hand, yellow-skinned people like Yin Bei, Fong Haojia, and Fong Yuelin would focus on collecting information about the natural and ecological environment of the Mondo continent. After activating the ability of the steel spear, Yin Bei was covered in a layer of silver-white metal from head to toe. He was hovering in the sky above the Umla Basin at subsonic speed. The ability of the steel spear in Yin Bei's hand came from Vivian, a rank 5 aptitude user from the Void Agency. After activating the ability, not only did a pair of steel-like wings break out his back, but his whole body was also covered in metal. His strength, speed, reaction, agility, and other physical attributes were all greatly improved. The armor covering him not only had amazing defensive power, but also concealed many weapons with special abilities. The chi on Yin Bei's body was transformed by the armor into a white turbulence. It looked like some kind of plasma jet engine, increasing Yin Bei's speed once again. He flew toward the border of the Umla Basin. Under Yin Bei's observation, this basin was just as Jonah had told him. It was a completely uninhabited land. In the vast forest, there were all kinds of animals. However, because there were all kinds of rare animal and plant resources in the basin, Yin Bei could also see some people like hunters and herbalists working in the basin. Yin Bei flew in the sky at high speed. These ordinary people could not sense his existence at all. Yin Bei did not want to communicate with them. This was not his mission. Moreover, according to the plan of the Alliance's general staff, this time, Earth's entire operation to obtain information about the magic planet had to be like a ghost. It would not affect the magic planet at all and not leave any unnecessary traces. Like a ghost, he would pass through them, sense them, and understand them without them noticing. Yin Bei circled in the sky and planned to end today's patrol and return to the camp. However, just as he turned around, a squawk suddenly came from the sky. A flying bird the size of a car descended from the sky and grabbed at Yin Bei's location. Oh, is this the animal here? Yin Bei turned around and looked at the giant bird that was rushing toward him. It obviously saw him as prey. Compared to the animals on Earth, it's a bit more ferocious. The next moment, a small dot appeared on the giant bird's head. The collapsing force field squeezed the bird's head into a small that could not be seen. The headless bird's body fell to the ground due to inertia. Yin Bei did not even look at him. He turned around and flew back to the camp. Just as Yin Bei activated his ability, in a small city dozens of kilometers away from the Umla Basin, a woman with wine-red hair suddenly opened her eyes and said to Dong, "They're here." Chapter 374. A few minutes later, Flant returned to the group's seats. Lu Feng glanced at him and found that the other party's eyes were a little dazed. He looked a little dazed. He frowned and asked, "Are you okay?" Golden Light also looked over. He stood up slowly and said to Tony, "Something's wrong. Use your psychic energy to check the surroundings." Although mages could sense psychic energy, their ability to sense psychic energy was not strong because they had been used to sensing magic waves for thousands of years. As long as the ability user did not expose his psychic energy, they would not be able to sense it. So, in order not to attract attention, Lu Feng and the others carefully hid their psychic energy and did not use it to alert the surroundings. Golden Light's psychic energy, in particular, was too powerful and eye-catching. It was easy to be surrounded by magicians. A few seconds later, Tony and the others' expressions changed. With their psychic energy, they could feel that many warriors with weapons were slowly approaching them from the nearby streets. At the same time, Flant reached out his hand. He, who was under the spell Charm Person, took out an explosive rune given to him by a magician. With a loud boom, a terrifying explosion resounded through the sky of the small town. The entire house of the restaurant collapsed. The diners inside died before they could react in time under the shockwave and flames of the explosion. 500 meters away, a young magician in luxurious clothes and wearing a monocle looked at the explosion in the distance and said with a smile, "It seems to have succeeded." This explosive rune is enough to blow up the city walls. I hope those demons don't all die and I can't report back." Another middle-aged magician said, "According to the information provided by Adam, these demon warriors all have strong vitality and defense. I'm afraid one explosive rune is not enough to kill them." "Oh no, that kid from the Farah family rushed up. Damn it, that kid wants to snatch people." At that moment, their expressions changed at the same time. They saw a golden pillar of light shoot up from the explosion. Like a miracle, it broke a big hole in the clouds in the sky. Endless golden psychic energy emerged from Golden Light's body. In the explosion just now, everyone was covered by his psychic energy. They were unharmed, except for Flant. Lauren screamed. Flant, who had taken out the explosive rune, was already lying on the ground. His head had been baptized by the flames and shock waves, and his face was completely disfigured. However, the area below his head was protected by the nano-armor, so he was still unharmed. But even so, he was already dead. Compared to Lauren, who was a scholar, the other ability users and military expert Watson were not as panicked. "It's an ambush, but I don't know if it's targeting our identities." Jing Guang looked at Lu Feng and said, "What do you think?" After saying that, Tony, Ivan, and Brian looked at Lu Feng, waiting for his decision. "I'll leave it to you. We'll leave first." Lu Feng looked at the street after the smoke and dust from the explosion gradually dissipated. The sound of armor clanking rang out, and rows of fully armed soldiers surrounded them from all directions. Every soldier's body was flowing with multicolored light. Clearly, they were all enchanted. In any case, let's break out of here first. Lu Feng pointed to the east. "If we get separated, we'll gather at the previous camp. Jing Guang, you'll be in charge of protecting and covering us. Lauren and Watson, you guys follow me." In the next moment, silver-white nano-armor covered everyone's heads. Light and shadow camouflage was activated, turning them invisible. However, Jing Guang was not as low-key as them. The silver-white nano-armor covered him from head to toe, and he turned into a silver human figure. At the same time, golden psychic energy roared out like a tsunami, drowning out the entire town. The feedback from the psychic energy, the infrared, sonar, radiation, and other detection devices in the nano-armor all allowed Jing Guang to know the situation of the entire battlefield like the back of his hand. In the infrared vision, the team members who were invisible with optical camouflage were hiding in a corner, waiting for Jing Guang to open up a path for them. Jing Guang casually swept a glance, and in the next moment, a mage flying in the sky entered his sight. Superior Mage Tamir Farah. The mage looked at Jing Guang with a smile, as if he was looking at countless rewards. He said, "Silver-white evil spirit, if you surrender without putting up a fight, you will suffer fewer injuries." Jing Guang ignored him and only stretched out a hand. In the next moment, a golden psychic cannon shot out in an unreasonable manner. The psychic cannon, which had a diameter of more than 30 meters, completely engulfed the mage. Not only him, but the surrounding soldiers, buildings, and land were all covered by the golden psychic cannon like a tsunami. Regardless of whether it was the defensive force field, magic armor, or magic power shield, all of the defensive means in front of this extremely barbaric and naked violence, under the impact of the psychic cannon, all of them were turned into dust. When the golden psychic cannon slowly dissipated in the air, the entire east side of the town had become a piece of white land. The mages, soldiers, and buildings from before had all disappeared. Through infrared vision, Jing Guang could see that the invisible team members had already left toward the east. He nodded, turned around, and looked at the other side of the encirclement. Just as he turned around, two spells hit his body one after another. Scorching Sun Blast, Freezing Orb, two spells, one red and one blue, hit Jing Guang's body directly. Although the Mondo continent did not develop science, the mages would still conclude some simple rules after a long period of practice. For example, thermal expansion and cold contraction. The two types of attacks, one hot and one cold, were far more destructive than 1 + 1 was greater than 2. If it was just a simple nano armor, they might have succeeded. However, whether it was Jin Guang's psychic cannon or the molecular stagnation layer on the surface of the nano-armor, neither of them could be broken through by simply accelerating or slowing down the movement of molecules. Seeing the silver demon floating in the air unharmed, the two mages who were 500 meters away exclaimed in shock. How is this possible? The power of a sorcerer? In the next moment, Jin Guang flashed and rushed in front of them with a long golden tail of flame. The two mages had already activated the spells on their magic items at the same time. Blink, slow movement, exhaustion of power. Looking at the mage in front of him who had suddenly teleported away and his own body that had suddenly slowed down, Jin Guang roared, and the golden psychic cannon rushed out in all directions like a volcanic eruption. Feeling the incredible power in the golden psychic cannon, the two mages' expressions changed drastically. They exclaimed, "How is this possible? Using your power so wastefully. Is your power infinite? This way of fighting is just like a child squandering gold coins." No matter how surprised, disbelieving, or fearful they were, under their pale faces, the golden psychic cannon seemed to be endless. It completely covered and engulfed the area within a radius of several kilometers. Terrifying impacts and explosions were happening around them all the time. Magic shield, protective force field, blink, steel body. One protective spell after another was cast by them, each one just right, and the skills contained in each one were countless times more brilliant than Jin Guang's pure psychic cannon. If it could be said that the two mages were surprised at first, but they were still somewhat disdainful of this evil demon's crude methods. Then when their spells were broken one after another by the violent psychic energy, and when their opponent's energy didn't appear, instead, it was their own energy that was gradually running out. Despair and disbelief appeared on their faces. How is this possible? How can your power be so abundant? Even a sorcerer wouldn't be able to last so long in such a crude way of using it. I don't believe it. This is an illusion. Yes, it must be an illusion. Jin Guang ignored the desperate cries of the two mages and increased the output of psychic cannon. Their faces that were on the verge of collapse were completely crushed. A few seconds later, a huge golden fireball had enveloped the entire town. From afar, it looked like a golden sun was slowly rising from the surface of the earth. Just as Lu Feng's group was besieged, Yin Bei's group, who were passing by a snowy mountain, was also besieged. There was no end to it. More than 100,000 undead army surrounded the group of people in the valley, about 10 kilometers away from the town where Jin Guang was besieged. Donger looked at the huge fireball slowly rising from the ground and said to Adam, who was still in the cloud courtyard through the communicator, they encountered it, but Jin Guang might have broken through the 5th energy level. Ordinary superior mages are no match for him. Is that so? Adam thought for a moment and said, "Are there any survivors?" Donger's pupils kept shrinking, as if she could see the situation in the distance. There should be some civilians who survived. Kill them. In short, we can't let the mages know too early that Earth has the power of a sorcerer and above. Think of a reason. Got it. This was Adam's train of thought. He wanted the mages to maintain their pride and slowly reveal Earth's strength to the world of mages. They couldn't pay too much attention to Earth's strength, but they couldn't underestimate Earth's strength either. Before the world of mages truly took Earth's strength seriously, he would do his best to arrange for both sides to constantly clash with each other until the grudge between them reached a point where it was impossible to resolve. Of course, Adam also knew that it was impossible to do all this perfectly. He could only do his best. At this moment, Donger's voice was heard again. The satellites they launched have been discovered. Should we destroy them? Of course, don't leave a single one behind. Completely cut off their communication. A cruel smile appeared on Adam's face. What do you think Liamping would do if the entire expedition team sent by Earth were to stay behind? If the Mage Guild and the 5 great empires don't send enough sorcerers, I don't think they can kill Yin Bei and Jin Guang. Ha ha. Adam laughed. Who knows? At the same time on Earth, Li Qian connected to Li Anping's communication channel. Your Majesty, we've lost contact with Lu Feng and the others. Lost contact, Li Anping said indifferently. Tell me the details. It's not a normal loss of contact. The 27 satellites we launched on the magic planet have all been disconnected. They may have all been attacked. The satellites were attacked? Li Onping frowned. According to Jonah's information, the people of the magic world should not have the concept of satellites. Only a few powerful mages understood that the ground under their feet was a sphere. However, the satellites were tens of thousands of meters high. It was impossible for mages to discover and attack them. Moreover, they were attacked at the same time. Also, before we lost contact, both of Lu Feng's teams were attacked. I understand. Li Onping's eyes flashed. In the next moment, he disappeared from the palace. Chapter 375. After passing through several corridors, Li Onping walked along the underground corridor toward the military warp gate under Xia Dragonfinch. Along the way, countless ability users and staff members knelt down and saluted him. It was as if he was braving the wind and waves alone. In order to be able to send troops directly to the underwater base and cross the World Crossing Gate, the Alliance had set up 2 warp gate halls in the Virtual Numeric Service and Xia Dragonfinch, respectively. They could transport Earth's troops to the underwater base at any time, anywhere, and then cross the warp gate and enter the other world. As Li Onping walked, his figure was captured by countless cameras and turned into various signals that were transmitted to the hands of countless upper echelons. Li Qian's message was the first to be accepted by Li Onping. "Your Majesty, where are you going?" Li Onping replied casually as he walked. "Didn't you say that you lost contact with them? I'm going to look for them." Li Qian hesitated for a moment before saying, "But according to the analysis of the General Staff Department, it's best that your Majesty doesn't delve too deeply into the magical world." The General Staff Department was recently established by Li Onping personally. A group of top-notch elites from all walks of life were selected to help him come up with some strategies to deal with the other world. Considering that he might face many different worlds in the future, although Li Onping's brain power was strong, it was impossible for him to always consider everything. Therefore, he needed a group of elites to assist him. They would help him come up with many strategies. In general, the General Staff Department was responsible for helping Li Onping come up with strategies. However, the specific decisions were still left to Li Onping to make. The General Staff Department and Li Onping had a point of agreement regarding the countermeasures to deal with the magical world. Li Onping's main body must not delve too deeply into the magical world, or even head into the magical world himself to engage in various battles and attacks. There were 2 main considerations for doing this. First, it would be very easy for the 2 worlds to be dragged into a complete war. The General Staff Department felt that it was very unwise to act rashly before the situation between the enemy and their side was clear. The second was more practical, and that was the so-called strategic depth. As long as Li Onping's psychic avatar could guard the world gate, and Li Onping himself could reach the underwater base and the land of White through the warp gate at any time, then Earth would be able to place the most intense battle in the other party's territory. And once the other party pulled the battlefield to Earth, considering the level of destructive power of Li Onping and Hygram, it would be very easy to create a situation where Earth would still suffer heavy losses even if they won. It was the same for the magic world. Even if they wanted to fight, they had to fight on the opposite side of the portal on the magic planet. For example, in the worst-case scenario, Li Onping went to the magic world, and the so-called demigod, Dionysus, whose strength was unknown, came to Earth. Then, compared to the medieval society of the Mondo continent, Earth would definitely suffer more losses. As long as Li Onping continued to guard the portal, Earth would have an absolute advantage regardless of whether they fought or retreated. Of course, if even Li Onping couldn't withstand the other party's attack and could only retreat to Earth, then there was nothing to talk about. Li Onping agreed with this strategy of the General Staff Department. However, his style of doing things had always been straightforward and pressing forward. Therefore, after learning that the expedition team had lost contact, he wanted to know what was going on immediately. Moreover, this didn't require him to really go deep into the magic world. He only needed to guard the world gate with his psychic avatar, or his original body to pass through the world gate without going deep. Either method would work. Therefore, Li Onping replied, "Let the troops at the world gate send reconnaissance robots over and do a comprehensive search of the expedition team. I'll be there right away. Don't worry, I won't go deep into the magic world." The expedition team suddenly disappeared, and all our satellites were attacked. This situation is definitely unusual. If someone is targeting us, then I have to find them first. Since Li Onping had already decided, Li Qian knew that she couldn't stop him. Understood. I'll inform the forward base immediately. 1 minute later, Li Onping had already passed through the world gate of the underwater base and arrived at the White Land. The general and his psychic avatar of the forward base both appear before him. Li Onping directly took Higram out of his clothes and tossed him into the psychic avatar's body. Stay here during this period of time. Don't cause any trouble. When a large group of people saw Higram's appearance, although they were astonished, Li Onping didn't say anything. They naturally wouldn't ask. The general at the side walked up and said, "Your Majesty, the drone has already passed through the world gate and set off from the temporary camp." Before Jin Guang and the others left, the temporary camp in the magic world had already concealed the entire world gate using optical camouflage and defensive fortifications, turning it into a temporary stronghold. This was also to prevent another person like Jonah from accidentally discovering the world-traversing door. Hearing the general's report, Li Onping nodded and walked toward the world gate. On the way here, he had thought about it for a while and decided to have his original body make a trip there personally. He would use his powerful magnetic field to release high-frequency electromagnetic waves to search for traces of the expedition team. According to the data from the satellites, the planet where the magic world was located was a planet that was about 4/5 the size of Earth. Other than the so-called Mondo continent, there were 2 other relatively small continental plates and countless islands. This time, it wasn't as obvious as the previous time with the missiles. The search targets were all on the surface, so the difficulty was obviously higher. However, Li Onping knew the communication channel of the other party's nanotechnology armor. Even if it took him a few hours to search using electromagnetic waves, it would still be much more convenient than using his psychic avatar to fly over. This was also the reason why Li Onping had decided to have his original body make a trip there. Therefore, under everyone's gaze, Li Onping directly stepped through the world gate. However, after stepping through the world gate, what appeared in front of Li Onping was not the base or the Umla basin that he had imagined. What appeared in front of Li Onping was a huge, empty library. Endless rows of bookshelves filled Li Onping's vision. However, the words on the covers of the books were not in any language that Li Onping knew. 100 meters in front of Li Onping, a silver-haired man sat on a chair with his back facing Li Onping. He seemed to be reading something carefully. Judging from the speed at which the man flipped through the paper, his reading speed was very fast. It could be said that he was reading 10 lines at a glance. With his superb eyesight, Li Onping could see that there were many books on the man's desk. The words on the books were very familiar to him. He was even familiar with the contents of the books. 3rd grade natural science, 1st grade mathematics, and high school physics. They were all teaching materials and books like this. The silver-haired man stretched and said in fluent Xia language, "I didn't expect to catch a big fish the first time I pulled in the net." Chapter 376. The silver-haired man had a face that was as pale as a sheet of paper. He gave off a feeling as if he had never seen the sun for a day. His 2 eye sockets were deeply sunken, and his cheekbones were protruding. He looked as if he was malnourished. However, Li Onping knew that this was just a facade. From the look in his eyes, it was as if he could see countless galaxies flowing in the vicissitudes of life. In Li Onping's eyes, the man was like a black hole in the void, engulfing and spitting out huge amounts of energy in the surrounding space at every moment. If even a little bit of the destructive prowess were to leak out, it would probably be enough to cause a world-shaking catastrophe in the entire eastern continent. The so-called earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis were just ordinary occurrences. Seeing this, Li Onping understood that the ability to extract vacuum zero-point energy from the void had become an instinctive existence for the man before him. It was just like breathing. The man was constantly engulfing and spitting out huge amounts of energy. Just a casual move from him would be enough to cause catastrophic destruction. However, when faced with such great power, Li Onping's gaze only lingered for a few seconds before he once again looked at the surroundings. Compared to the man before him, his primary question was why he had appeared here. All sorts of probing rays were released from his body, and within a few milliseconds, he had already come to a conclusion. Has the space-time regulation been changed? Space-time regulation? I like the name you guys came up with. The silver-haired man held up a junior high school third-grade math book and said, "Such a systematic and quantitative description of the entire natural world is something that I've never thought of before. I have to say that although magic has bestowed us with great power, to a certain extent, it also causes us to focus all our attention on magic itself and neglect the various details in nature." As he spoke, he had already walked up to Li Onping. His empty gaze swept across Li Onping's body, and he slowly said, "This is my half-plane just now. I've stuck it together with the world-crossing door like two thin pancakes. When you pass through the world-crossing door, you've already arrived here. And all the people or things that wish to pass through the world-crossing door must pass through here. Then I'll just kill you." As he spoke, Li Onping had already made his move. No, it should be said that before the voice left his mouth, he had already moved. In the surrounding air, countless amounts of energy flowed into Li Onping's hands. The movement between atoms had never been as intense as it was at this moment. Every second, countless fusion and fission reactions occurred. A series of chain reactions stimulated all the particles, allowing them to release their energy to their heart's content. When Li Onping punched, the torrent of energy drowned everything in front of him. It seemed that even space was pierced by this punch, and a series of crisp sounds echoed in the demiplane. After the punch, the sky and earth changed colors, and the entire demiplane's library disappeared. It was as if a painting on a canvas had been erased, revealing a white space. The silver-haired man was still standing in front of him, looking at the white space in front of him with pity. The library just now was my favorite scene. If possible, I'd be willing to spend eternity there to study the mysteries of magic. The atomic bursting fist was ineffective. Li Onping frowned as he looked at the strange space around him. He had some understanding. The opponent's energy storage is almost infinite. As long as my attack can't break the opponent's defense in an instant, then no matter how powerful my attack is, the opponent will be able to resist my attack with unlimited energy. No, that's not all. The mathematics book in the silver-haired man's hand was still undamaged. Thanks to this advanced mathematics knowledge, my demiplane space has become more complete. Speaking of which, among the knowledge of Earth, my favorite is mathematics. It's so beautiful and classic. It's simply the most perfect language in the entire universe. All the problems in nature can be solved through the imaginary space of mathematics. I want to ask how you know these things. I'm afraid you won't tell me either. As Li Onping spoke, he raised both hands at the same time. Countless positrons were gathered in his hands, and a terrifying annihilation reaction was about to be born in his hands. The people I sent to Mondo, are they in your hands? When Li Onping's positron cannon shot towards him, the silver-haired man's usually calm expression changed. Hundreds of thousands of layers of protective force fields and elemental barriers spread out in front of him, each of them hundreds of times stronger than Jonas. They covered the silver-haired man layer by layer, looking like a transparent lotus flower that was slowly blooming in the space. The positron cannon was like breaking layer after layer of glass, but every time a protective force field was broken, more would be formed, until the huge energy of the annihilation reaction slowly dissipated in the air. The silver-haired man was still in a state of unscathed. The silver-haired man's mastery of magic was not inferior to Li Onping's battle skills at all. When the positron cannon's effect ended, the silver-haired man shook his head in disappointment. I thought that at our level, other than ourselves, everyone else would be ants. You still care about your subordinates, which means that your heart isn't mature enough. As expected, it's because you're too young. Your experience is too short. Although you have the power of a god, your heart is still the heart of a mortal. With a sigh, he continued, for people at our level, the so-called countries, nations, and bloodlines are nothing but fleeting clouds. For us, the truth of this world and the mysteries of the entire universe should be our true pursuit. He looked at Lianping and said seriously, I'm a magician, and only a magician. Studying magic and the mysteries of this world is my mission. His words did not stop Lianping from attacking. Countless particles moved at high speed on Lianping's hands, and the temperature was rising at an unimaginable speed. 10,000 degrees Celsius, 20,000 degrees Celsius, 50,000 degrees Celsius. While controlling these particles, Lianping's eyes revealed a hint of excitement. He looked at the silver-haired man and said slowly, your so-called thoughts are just thoughts you have after you have obtained unrivaled power and confidence. Backward education, decadent society, and great power have completely blinded your eyes. The temperature in Fang Xingjian's hands continued to rise. 100,000 degrees Celsius, 300,000 degrees Celsius, 700,000 degrees Celsius. Although the temperature kept on rising, the heat was locked in Lianping's hands, not letting it leak out. Lianping continued to say, I'm very curious. When you're kneeling before me, will you still be able to say what you just said? When Lianping finished saying this, a visible red fireball, or rather, a radiation ball, appeared between his hands. The temperature inside the fireball had reached an unprecedented 2 million degrees Celsius, and it was still rising at a terrifying speed. Looking at this scene, the silver-haired man's countenance changed slightly. He said, that's fine. Since you don't wish to communicate with words, you can answer my question with a battle. But it seems that you still don't understand the difference between us. Although science is great, magic itself is an existence that surpasses magic. It is the essence of the world. At the next moment, the silver-haired man recited the level 9 spell, Time Stop. Within a short 10 seconds, he recited several thousand spells at high speed. When time resumed, the silver-haired man had already casually performed over 30 types of ancient level 10 spells that could destroy a large area. Energy waves that could cause atoms to disintegrate, terrifying cold currents that could freeze the entire ocean, ultimate dimensional slash that could slice apart a continent, and disintegration rays that could pierce through the Earth's core with a single blow. The silver-haired man's counterattack was so terrifying and violent. Countless violent spells engulfed Lianping in an instant, and the entire demiplane seemed to have reverted to the scene before the universe exploded. The so-called time and space lost their meaning at this moment, and the only thing left was pure destruction. Looking at Lianping, who had been completely engulfed by his spells, the silver-haired man smiled proudly. You should wake up here first. But at the next moment, he already knew how ridiculously wrong he was. Although he had overestimated Lianping's strength as much as possible based on the information Adam had given him, he realized that he had still underestimated his opponent when he actually faced him. A temperature of over 20 million degrees suddenly appeared where Lianping was. It was comparable to the temperature at the center of the sun and was enough to ignite the temperature of the entire Earth in an instant. With a tyrannical and unreasonable method that relied purely on brute force, all the spells in front of Lianping were burned to ashes. Looks like ordinary attacks won't be able to destroy you. With the energy we have at our disposal, if we continue to fight like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to finish this in a few years. Walking out of the scene that resembled an exploding star, Lianping raised his head and looked at his surroundings. At some point in time, he and the silver-haired man had appeared in an unknown part of the starry sky. In the clash, just now, the silver-haired man clearly couldn't be bothered to continue operating his demiplane. After the white space shattered, the two of them appeared here. You've moved the demiplane here? Lianping looked at the high-temperature flames that had erupted from him. After losing the restraints of the demiplane, they were like tongues of fire extended from the sun, sweeping towards the nearest planet. After a few days, when the radiation of the flames reached this planet, the extremely high temperature would probably ignite the entire planet's atmosphere in an instant, causing it to instantly revert to how it was hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our power is too strong. I had no choice but to place the demiplane here in advance. The silver-haired man directly used a communication spell to talk to Li Anping. This place is tens of millions of kilometers away from the Mondo continent. We can use our power without worry. Since you don't like to communicate with words, I can only use my fist to communicate with you. I just hope that you can persevere until I'm satisfied. Don't fall too early. Li Anping didn't care about the other party's words. Instead, his gaze was completely focused on the silver-haired man. He saw that the other party's body had actually changed form during the attack just now, turning into an existence that was like smoke. This is the so-called elemental transformation. The moment he saw the other party's body, hints of understanding seemed to flash in Li Anping's eyes. Countless numbers flowed crazily in his mind like a waterfall. Speaking of which, we haven't introduced ourselves to each other, right? Just then, the other party spoke again. How should I address you? King of Demons. Or should I say, Li Anping? Li Anping smiled. His eyes emitted a dangerous glow, and he said slowly, Dionysus, your title as a demigod really isn't exaggerated at all. As a reward for you, I'll personally twist off your head and put in my collection room. Speaking of which, this is the first time I've spoken so much to my enemy. Li Anping's eyes were filled with excitement. It's because none of them can make me so excited. Not only do you have power, but you also have the wisdom to control power. From you, from magic, I've found the path that I've been looking for. Just as Li Anping and Dionysus disappeared from the Mondo continent at the same time in the courtyard in the clouds, Adam slammed his palm down fiercely on the table. Accompanied by a loud rumble, the entire marble table was melted by Adam's palm and turned into a pitch-black colloid. This idiot. He scolded the man on the other end through the communication device. Mephistopheles, what did you tell him? Didn't I ask you to watch over him? Just drag the demiplane to the world crossing gate. Why'd he go there personally? On the other end of the communication device, the person who was reporting to Adam was Mephistopheles, who had been confirmed dead by the Alliance. He was the supreme leader of the Tyrol's National Ability User Organization, the Annihilation Abyss. Right now, he did not have the domineering aura of a supreme leader at all. Faced with Adam's responsibility, even though his eyes were filled with fury, he could only endure silently. Forget it. You won't be able to control him anyway. Just stay where you are and contact me if there's any news. Adam hung up the communication device, and for the first time, a hint of uncontrollable fury appeared in his eyes. Initially, he had only wanted Dionysus to send Li Anping out through the demiplane. With a distance of several tens of millions of kilometers, he would be able to buy enough time. By then, with Dionysus' martial prowess and without Li Anping's interference, the Earth would be at a disadvantage with just the psychic incarnation alone. What was even better was that the psychic incarnation would become his best target. This is Li Anping's first weakness. The entire Earth is his weakness. After he is exiled alone, in order to protect the Earth, the psychic incarnation will definitely go all out to stop Dionysus. However, the current psychic incarnation is much weaker than his actual body and won't be able to stop Dionysus at all. The only thing he can do is to keep getting attacked by Dionysus, and then let his actual body take on the damage until he dies completely. During this period of time, when his actual body is away from the Earth, the entire human race will be our hostage. As long as he doesn't send his psychic incarnation back to where his actual body is, he can only silently take on Dionysus' attacks. If he were to send his psychic incarnation back, it would be the same as giving up the Earth to us temporarily. This was Adam's first plan. Even if he was unable to kill Li Anping and make Li Anping give up on the Earth and send his psychic incarnation away, he would still be able to deal a heavy blow to Dionysus and wipe out and conquer all of his subordinates. The price he would have to pay was that Dionysus' demiplane would be temporarily placed in the distant outer space and would not be able to be used. However, Adam had not expected that not only had Dionysus trapped Lianping, but he had also brought Dionysus over. In this matter, Dionysus' pursuit and desire for power and magic, as well as his desire to communicate with an expert like Lianping, had exceeded Adam's control over the entire situation. Night Beast asked worriedly, "Then what should we do next?" Night Beast mumbled, "It's fine. Let the two idiots fight it out. We'll carry out the second plan. Lianping must die." However, there was still a hint of worry in his heart. In the history that he knew, Dionysus was already different from the past. After grasping some technological knowledge, it was hard for him to predict what kind of sparks would fly between him and the current Lianping. At this moment, Night Beast could not help but feel a little regretful. Perhaps he had given Dionysus too much information. Chapter 377. The next moment, the psychic energy turned into a long plasma spray. Within a few tenths of a second, Yin Bei's speed reached the speed of sound. After the explosion, Yin Bei turned into a black straight line. He pierced through the spirit formation in the sky that was thousands of meters deep. At this moment, the second half of a sentence was transmitted to Feng Yulin and the other two through the communicator. "Take care of yourselves. I'll take care of them." Compared to Golden Light, who could protect his teammates with an almost unlimited amount of psychic energy, Yin Bei's ability and combat style were all extreme attacks. Just as he finished speaking, hundreds of collapsing force fields with a radius of more than 1 meter spread out in all directions with him as the center. With just this one attack, thousands of spirits were either crushed or cut in half. They turned into dust and fell to the ground. After the attack, thousands of spirits screamed and fled in all directions. The area around Yin Bei was empty. As they scattered in all directions, their bodies had already turned into faint shadows. In order to avoid the opponent's next attack, they changed from being able to affect the material world to being in a pure spirit form. Sandro, who was a few kilometers away, saw this scene through the mage eye. He thought to himself, "Interesting ability, interesting equipment. Maybe I should be like Sir Dionysus and keep a few demons alive for my next experiment. They look much more interesting than ogres or halflings." Just as Sandro was thinking about this, the 7 bone dragons in the sky roared at the same time. The icy breath from their mouths was directed at Yin Bei, who was still in the sky. The icy fog that was hundreds of times colder than the Siberian cold current drowned Yin Bei's location with a temperature that could bring a town back to the Ice Age. The moment the cold wave drowned Yin Bei's body, a piercing low-temperature alarm went off in his nanotechnology armor. He looked at the temperature displayed on the display on his helmet. It had already reached negative 100 degrees Celsius and was still dropping at an alarming speed. Yin Bei sneered. Compared to Solomon's molecular deceleration, this is like a popsicle for children. After saying that, Yin Bei sprinted. His entire body left a trail of plasma that was more than 10 meters long. He had already left the ice fog and was now thousands of meters high in the sky. With a few clicks, the 6 silver cannons that looked like little beetles slowly detached themselves from Yin Bei's metal armor and floated around him in the shape of a hexagram. The ability of the steel spear came from Vivian, the Saintess of Steel. This ability would form a variety of weapons powered by psychic energy under the armor according to the user's personality, temperament, and interests. The 6 floating cannons before them were strategic weapons that combined the Saintess of Steel and Yin Bei's collapse cannons. Yin Bei did not want to get entangled with the native mages in front of him. After reading the information on magic, he deeply understood that magic was a complicated system of power. Every powerful mage had endless means. Compared to the purity of ability users, their comprehensive abilities were stronger. That was why he did not want to get entangled with the mages who were prepared. Instead, he wanted to quickly end the enemy before they understood him. In the next moment, the 6 floating cannons lit up with white light. A force that could destroy all matter was aimed at the bone dragons and the undead army under Yenbei's feet. Try to eliminate most of the undead army. Don't let Kevin and the others get involved. Just as Yenbei activated the floating cannon, Zindral looked at Yenbei in the sky in bewilderment. In his perception, a destructive power was being emitted from the other party's body. Although he did not know that this was psychic energy, the strength of this unfamiliar energy was enough to make him alert. A series of mysterious incantations sounded from his mouth. In the next moment, the 7 huge bone dragons' eyes shone with a ghostly blue light. They were like 7 huge aircraft carriers, bringing with them a boundless aura of death and cold waves as they crashed towards Yenbei in the sky. At the same time, the thousands of skeleton mages on the ground raised their hands. From their white knuckles, countless ice, fire, lightning, storms, and other destructive spells shot out. They then intertwined in the air, forming a destructive magic torrent. It shot towards Yenbei in the sky. Wherever it passed, even the bone dragons in the sky had to dodge to the side. Although it contained countless low-level spells, when a number of spells reached such a level, there was a qualitative change. After the chain reaction between them, it was comparable to a level 10 forbidden spell. Numbers were the specialty of necromancers. Looking at the magic torrent rushing towards him, Yenbei's expression did not change at all. He only waited quietly for the floating cannons beside him to activate. They would spread true destruction to this world. There was no sound, nor any light effects. When the collapsing cannons were shot out from the 6 floating cannons, all the previous attacks paled in comparison. If the magic torrent that Sandro had commanded the skeleton mages to release was a symphony of destruction, then the collapsing cannons released by Yenbei would truly turn everything into nothing. In the path of the collapsing cannons, be it the bone dragons or the skeleton mages, all the undead army was instantly compressed into countless singularities that could not be seen with the naked eye. That was not all. Even the air, sound, and light could not escape the detection of this force. Everything in front of him instantly turned into a vacuum. After one shot, a piece of the snow seemed to have been wiped off. More than 3/5 of the undead army had completely disappeared. Only a portion of the skeleton warriors at the periphery and the spirits in the sky that had completed their transformation survived. Sandro, who was a few kilometers away, saw this scene in front of him. He felt as if his heart that had stopped beating a long time ago seemed to be bleeding again. The undead army in front of him was accumulated by him through countless years of scrimping and living frugally. Looking at Yenbei in the sky, he roared angrily, and waves of black death aura emerged from the surface of his body. His head was like a skeleton, his arms were made of bones, and his cloak was empty. After removing his human form, he had completely transformed into a lich and soared into the sky. Along with a series of mysterious incantations, all kinds of defensive barriers and buff spells gradually lit up on Sandro's body. 2 days later, Holy Roland Empire's imperial capital, Raven. In a tavern in the civilian district, more than a dozen soldiers who had just changed shifts were making a ruckus in the tavern. Did you hear? That magic beast Sandro is dead. A veteran in his 40s mysteriously said to his companion behind him. As second-class civilians who had some basic martial skills, they were slightly more flexible in their thinking compared to ordinary third-class civilians. Even so, the few gossips in taverns and the 200-pound prostitutes in the taverns were their best pastimes. When the veteran told this news, the young soldier at the side had a face full of disbelief. How is that possible? That's the magic beast Sandro. His phylactery should still be stored in the Mage Guild. The veteran proudly smiled and said, I heard Sir Ezekiel say it himself. When a messenger of the Mage Guild reported to him, the Mage Guild's messenger shattered the phylactery. It is said that his phylactery in the guild broke on its own. That is the phylactery of a lich. The veteran's words caused a commotion in the tavern. The soldiers from the other 2 tables also pricked up their ears and looked in the veteran's direction. Seeing this, The pride on the veteran's face became even stronger. They heard the soldier who was previously shouting in disbelief ask again, "A lich can actually die? Could it be that a grand magician made a move?" The so-called Marshal of Mages referred to the strongest sorcerer in each country. However, although there were many countries in the Mondo continent, only the 5 most powerful countries, such as the Holy Roman Empire, had martial magisters who were recognized by the entire continent as the 5 great marshals. Hearing the recruit's question, the veteran shook his head and said, "You guessed wrong. Each of the 5 great marshals is stationed in the imperial capital and never leaves." How could they go and kill Sandro? This time, I heard that it happened while he was on the way to hunt down a silver demon. Hearing the words silver demon, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Ever since Adam spread rumors about Earth in the name of Dionysus, the name of an evil demon had gradually spread to the entire continent. Because Earth's expedition team was all covered in silver-white nano armor during battle, some people called them silver demons. The city guard at the side also stood up and said, "I heard that the bodies of those evil demons are made of silver. As long as we catch one, we won't have to worry about our next life." The veteran wickedly smiled and said, "With just you, a soft-footed shrimp? I heard that in order to capture the silver demons, the Empire has already planned to dispatch a Grand Magician Corps. More than 3 towns in the north have already been destroyed by those evil demons." The recruit at the side nodded and added, That's right. I heard that those silver demons kill everyone they see and can also release a golden light. Everyone shrouded in the light will turn into gold coins and be collected by them." When he said this, the soldier at the side all revealed a greedy look and nodded. "That's why His Excellency Demigod wants to capture them." After hearing this, the veteran spat and scolded, "You pig brains, His Excellency Demigod lacks that little bit of money? The reason why we want to capture these silver demons this time is because they all come from hell and want to occupy our world." After the veteran finished speaking, a soldier with a fierce face said in a muffled voice, "Even if the sky falls, there are tall people to hold it up. With His Excellency Demigod here, we don't have to worry about this kind of thing. I'm more interested in capturing a silver demon. Have you heard? There's a small soldier at the border who accidentally caught a lone silver demon and struck it rich. Not only was he promoted by 3 ranks, but he also sold the chance to enchant magic for 5,000 gold coins." The recruit shouted, "Are you for real? A guy who doesn't know magic can capture evil demons? That's where you don't understand. There are strong and weak silver demons. The most powerful ones can fly in the sky, burrow into the ground, and overturn rivers and seas. But there are also some weaker ones who are not much more powerful than those mage apprentices. This captured silver demon has been sent to the Mage Guild in the Imperial capital today. I heard that these evil demons are full of treasures. If you peel off their skin and wear it, you will be invulnerable and have infinite strength." As the atmosphere of the conversation became more and more heated, the content of these ruffians' conversation became more and more outrageous. Gradually, they moved from information about evil demons to women and violence. In the corner of the tavern, a man wearing brown linen clothes with an ordinary appearance, who was completely unnoticeable in a sea of people, threw a few coins and walked out of the tavern. After leaving the tavern, the man looked at the sky and tapped his feet. It looked like he was just taking a stroll, but his speed was very fast as he flashed into a side alley. At the moment when he turned into the alley, the clothes on his body transformed into a half-body armor that belonged to the city guards. After a moment of blur, his appearance had changed greatly. If one looked carefully, it was the appearance of one of the city guards who was making a ruckus in the tavern just now. With the clothes and appearance of the city guards, no one stopped him even in the night, allowing him to smoothly pass through a dozen streets and arrive at the slums of the imperial capital. As the surrounding lights dimmed, the man's speed became faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, he had left behind a series of afterimages. Then, with a sudden turn of his body, he had already entered the sewers. Then, the half-body armor on his body changed again. As his face blurred and became clear, he had become a wanderer that could be seen everywhere in the sewers of the slums. Along the way, scavengers could be seen sitting in groups of 2s and 3s around the fire. They looked at the man with dangerous and greedy eyes, but when they saw the man's strong arms and muscles, no one walked up to him in the end. After walking for a few hundred meters, the man sat beside a fire and saw that there was only one scavenger by the fire. It was Golden Light, who was dressed in rags. As for Tony and the others, they had already rushed to the Umla Basin. Only Golden Light and Lu Feng had followed the captured Lauren all the way to the imperial capital, Raven. After seeing the man sit down, Golden Light spoke first. "How is it?" Then, the man's face changed again, this time into Lu Feng's appearance. He said with a grim expression, "Lauren has been sent to the Mage Guild's branch in the imperial capital. It's the place I pointed out to you during the day." After a pause, he looked at Golden Light's expression and continued, "For what I know of the situation in the imperial capital, there are already more than 10 sorcerers gathered. Even the Mage Guild has more than 5 permanent members. If we want to save Lauren, no matter how fast we are, we'll have to face at least 5 sorcerers. They might have forcefully removed the nano armor. With Lauren's willpower, he might have already revealed all the information related to us. In my personal opinion, he has already lost the value of being saved, not to mention taking such a huge risk." Chapter 378. Is there no value in saving him? Golden Light asked. "Yes," Lu Feng said. "Compared to the danger of saving Lauren, the value of saving him is too low." Golden Light saw that Lu Feng was staring at him so closely and said, "Don't worry. I won't be so willful as to take such a big risk to save him." After saying this, the atmosphere between the two fell into silence. This was already the 6th day on the magic planet. Tomorrow was supposed to be the day to return to Earth after the completion of the first phase of the inspection. But the two did not expect that starting from the 4th day, the expedition team not only lost contact with Earth, but also encountered more than a dozen waves of mages chasing after them. In the beginning, it was only some superior and inferior mages who cooperated with the army to encircle and annihilate them. However, as the intensity of the battle continued to intensify, the magic shooters soon joined in, bringing great pressure to the entire expedition team. Although Golden Light defeated them one by one with his powerful strength, but the mage's endless means still brought great trouble to the expedition team, especially teleportation spells, charm spells, barriers and traps, etc., all of which made the expedition team, who lacked magical detection methods, fall into a desperate situation. In addition to the death of the powerless Frente and the capture of Lauren, Braniers also lost an arm because of the cracking ray. Thanks to his strong physique and the emergency treatment device of the nanoarmor, he did not die. In particular, Golden Light and the others found that even with Golden Light's high speed and the stealth ability of the nanoarmor, they could not get rid of the other party. Countless times, after they broke through the encirclement, another group of mages blocked in front of them. Finally, after capturing a superior mage, after a round of bloody interrogation, they learned from the other party's mouth that Golden Light, as the strongest in their group, had already been located by the Holy Roland Empire's prophecy mage. In the case that the other party had a teleportation spell, they absolutely couldn't escape. So they divided into 2 teams. Tony and Ivan took Braniers and rushed to the portal. Lu Feng and Golden Light simply faced the difficulties, killing all the way and tracking the other party's whereabouts in an attempt to rescue Lauren. There are still 2 hours before their prophecy spell takes effect again. Let's get out of here quickly. At this moment, Lu Feng saw the dangerous glint in Jing Guang's eyes and suddenly said, "Kid, you're not thinking of wreaking havoc in the imperial capital, are you? Passively defending is not my style. Although there are many magic shooters here, it's impossible to be invulnerable as long as we defend." Golden Light said coldly, "Since we can't save Lauren, we can only kill him to prevent him from revealing more information about Earth." Hearing Jing Guang's words, Lu Feng's breathing paused slightly. This was a plan that he had always wanted to say, but was worried that Jin Guang would not agree. Compared to going deep into the Mage Guild and saving Lauren, who was just an ordinary person, it was much easier for them to attack and destroy the building where the Mage Guild was located. Even if Lauren was not dead, she could vent her anger of being chased like a dog these days. 2 hours later, on Brighton Street in the Riven Empire's capital, a travel-worn messenger knocked on the door of the Mage Guild. After a minute or two, there was a creak and a middle-aged servant opened the door. He looked at the messenger with a condescending gaze and asked, "Who are you looking for?" The messenger's voice sounded a little nervous, as if he could feel the prestige of the Mage Guild. He said nervously, "This is a package for souvenirs." The servant glanced at the messenger hesitantly and cautiously took the package from the messenger's hand. He said coldly, "Got it. You can leave now." Before he finished speaking, there was a bang and the door of the Mage Guild was closed once again. The thick and heavy iron door almost hit the messenger's nose. He could not help but take a step back. However, he did not show any anger at the servant's arrogance and rudeness. Instead, he raised his head and looked at this 7-story building and laughed frivolously. Then he left. The servant who received the package looked at its surface and shook his head. Although there was nothing written on it, since the other party had specified that it was for the sorcerer, then it was not something he could interfere with. He shook the bell by the wall. Half a minute later, there was a puffing sound in the air. A pure black kitten with snow-white wings flew over. It was a familiar summon by this branch of the Mage Guild. It existed as a kind of elf that helped the mages with their work and daily lives. As a pure magical creature, they did not need to eat or drink. They only needed to be given a few gems as their salary every month. The middle-aged servant was already used to the existence of the familiar. He put the package in front of the familiar and said respectfully, "Serene's package." The familiar nodded proudly and then made a human-like meow, as if to say that it understood. Then, it used its mouth to pick up the package in the servant's hand and flew up the stairs of the Mage Guild. In an independent office, Rainiers was sitting behind his desk and reading a new magic magazine. There were several improved techniques for protection magic in the magazine, which made his eyes light up and reveal a smile. When the black cat, tamed beast, gently placed the package on his desk and meowed, Rainiers raised his head, took out a gem from his pocket, and threw it to the tamed beast. The cat happily took the gem and put it in the small pocket on its belt. Then, it rubbed against Rainier's hand and flapped its wings to leave his office. Rainiers looked at the package on the desk and saw that it was completely empty. He frowned and said, "Did you not write the sender?" As he spoke, his fingertips moved gently. Detection spells, such as biological detection, poison detection, magic item identification, and other detection spells were released one after another. As a mage, he was still very cautious. However, as a mage from a magic planet, his common sense obviously restrained him. The package in front of him was like a stone that did not react to the detection spells he released. Rainiers murmured, "Could it be a gem, a material, a magic book?" As he spoke, he reached out and slowly opened the package. He saw that there was a wooden box in the package, and in the center of the wooden box, a silver-white sphere was quietly placed inside. There was a bright red number jumping on it, 00:10. The numbers of the Mondo continent were obviously not Arabic numerals, so Rainiers could not understand the meaning of this string of bright red, jumping characters. He just picked up the metal sphere curiously. He knocked on the metal shell with his finger and said with a puzzled expression, "Could it be a music box? But how did these jumping characters come about?" As he spoke, he put the sphere back into the wooden box. He had already treated this thing as some kind of cultural relic made by ancient mages. At this time, the number on the sphere had jumped to 0:01. The next moment, a glaring white light that was enough to blind mortals shot out from a sphere. Before Rainiers could react, more than 1,000,000 tons of pressure and tens of thousands of degrees high temperature had completely erased his body from this world. Although the Mage Guild in the Imperial capital was only a branch, there were hundreds of defensive spells set up. They could defend against the frontal attacks of several sorcerers. But at this moment, the Mage Guild's defensive force field, Ring of Fire, Domain of Silence, and other defensive spells all became as fragile as glass and instantly shattered with a loud bang. Then, the terrifying heat and shock waves instantly engulfed dozens of streets around the Mage Guild and turned into a huge fireball that rose from the ground. This night, countless poor people in the suburbs of the imperial capital seemed to have seen a huge mushroom planted near the center of the imperial capital. Golden Light looked at the flames that soared into the sky in the distance and said to Lu Feng through the nano-armor's communicator, "How is it?" Lu Feng's voice sounded a little jumbled, as if he was affected by the nuclear explosion. He said intermittently, "Damn it, those lunatics from the RAS, they actually included such a powerful tactical nuclear bomb in the nano-armor." Golden Light smiled as if he was very satisfied with the nuclear bomb's effect. Ever since the Alliance fully grasped nuclear fusion and fission technology, this kind of tactical nuclear bomb had become a conventional weapon of the military. The original goal was to destroy the defensive structures on the battlefield, but now they were using it as a gift, and the effect was quite good. Golden Light replied, "Don't worry, this tactical nuclear bomb is very safe. Without authorization, it won't explode even if you throw it into lava. Unfortunately, only one of each nano-armor is equipped." The explosion in the imperial capital destroyed more than 30 buildings, including the Mage Guild, and caused the death of 5,000 people, including 2 sorcerers. The other 3 sorcerers stationed in the Mage Guild were able to escape because of the dimensional gates and teleportation that were set up beforehand. However, the radioactive dust that filled the sky of the imperial capital turned the ground within a radius of several kilometers into a forbidden zone for life. In the eyes of the people of the Mondo continent, this was considered a curse planted by the Silver Demon. Not only were the 3 surviving magic shooters bedridden, but there were also countless civilians living in the imperial capital who were suffering from hair loss, blisters, nose and mouth bleeding, and sudden death under the power of the curse. For a time, countless civilians and nobles fled the imperial capital out of fear of the Silver Demon's curse. While the news about the Silver Demons on the Mondo continent was becoming more and more popular, an exchange in outer space was also heating up. Chapter 379. In the cosmic space that was 50 million kilometers away from the magical planet, all sorts of bizarre and unprecedented phenomena were constantly colliding intensely in this void space. What was a vacuum? It was a sea of energy that kept on fluctuating. When the energy reached its peak, it would turn into pairs of fundamental particles. When the energy reached its trough, the pairs of fundamental particles would annihilate each other and turn into energy. To Li Onping and Dionysus, it was a vacuum that was not empty. The vacuum zero-point energy that was everywhere became their unlimited source of power. However, the 2 of them had different battle habits and formed 2 completely different battle styles. Li Onping kept on moving around Dionysus at high speed. His body was almost in a half-disintegrated state. In this environment where there was no air resistance and no gravity, his speed was constantly unleashed. His speed had already exceeded several tens of thousands of meters per second, and it was still increasing. It was as if he had turned into countless rays of light, piercing toward Dionysus, who was standing still. Every second, there would be thousands of punches swinging toward Dionysus. Each punch would trigger countless collisions between positrons and positrons. After the annihilation reaction, a tremendous amount of energy would be released. It was as if there were thousands or tens of thousands of hydrogen bombs swallowing and spewing out surging powers of destruction toward Dionysus every second. If any of the punches here were to appear on Earth, it would bring about an apocalyptic disaster. However, in the vast universe, they were just tiny dots that could not be seen. Dionysus' opponent was not harmed by attacks of this level. It was because Dionysus was a top-notch expert who was on the same level as Li Onping. Faced with the apocalyptic attacks that Li Onping released, Dionysus was always able to break them one by one with a continuous stream of superior magic. Destruction spells such as flames, ice, and thunder were more than 1,000 times more powerful in his hands. Dionysus' brain structure also seemed to be different from that of ordinary people. It was also possible that he had used some sort of magic as assistance. No matter how fast Leomping was, he was unable to escape from Dionysus' reaction. Occasionally, he would cast a spell of advanced time stop, which allowed him to have a lot of extra casting time. He even gained a slight upper hand in the battle against Leomping. However, there was no trace of pride in his eyes. Even though he couldn't find anyone on the magic planet who was close to his combat power, he had imagined countless battles of this level in his mind. At their level, once they fought, they could rely on the endless sea of energy. As long as there was no absolute gap between them, it was possible for them to fight for days, weeks, months, or even years. While he was thinking about this, the magic on his body didn't stop at all. Countless hurricanes suddenly gushed out from his body, and then, like a violent cyclone, rapidly spread in all directions. Dionysus' thoughts directly turned into a mental wave that was transmitted to Leomping's mind in a form similar to electromagnetic waves. He then communicated with Leomping. I remember 500 years ago, I embarked on a long journey. In your words, it is interstellar travel. It's all thanks to the existence of the portal. With my magic, I'll have an advantage over you guys in the universe. I passed by dozens of planets, but I didn't find any life. But even so, the different environments of the various planets have given me countless inspirations. While Dionysus was speaking, the cyclone in the surroundings became increasingly stronger. Countless particles were glued together, forming a storm that was visible to the naked eye. When Dionysus finished speaking, the storm cyclone had grown to a terrifying cyclone that was 30,000 meters long and had a span of over 10,000 meters. Dionysus continued. One of the planets left a deep impression on me. It was formed completely by gas, just like a cyclone. The oceans and storms that were everywhere formed its body. It was so beautiful that it was mesmerizing, just like now. While Dionysus was speaking, Leomping and his vision were engulfed by countless gases. Hurricanes that exceeded 400 kilometers per hour blew in their ears. Occasionally, cloud towers that were 4,000 or even 6,000 meters tall could be seen appearing around them. With just a few words, Dionysus had created a place that was similar to a gaseous planet. However, this scene that was extremely beautiful to them was a forbidden zone for life to ordinary people. It was a boundless hell. Atmospheric dragons that could tear everything apart would occasionally roar in their ears. Hurricanes that crushed all matter into fine particles could be seen everywhere. The low temperature of over minus 200 degrees Celsius was the normal temperature of this place. In such a harsh environment, even a level 5 ability user would not be able to hold on for long and would die immediately. If a sorcerer were to release countless defensive spells in advance, they might be able to hold on for a few more hours. The destructive magic that could control the storm could already be considered a miracle. Just by relying on the cosmic storm created by this magic, Dionysus already possessed the power to destroy all the humans on an entire planet. After several thousand years of accumulation, although you haven't been able to figure out the essence of this universe, you've definitely discovered many interesting tricks. Even though he was in the middle of this violent cyclone that could destroy an entire planet, Leomping still did not show any signs of panic on his face. Instead, the excitement in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. The atmosphere of blades that could be seen everywhere in the air were like obedient kittens when they scraped against him. They could not leave the slightest mark on his body. When he spoke, he did not use electromagnetic waves at all. He only spoke word by word with his mouth. Then, as if every word he spoke possessed substantial power, he controlled the airflow in the surroundings and sent the sound waves to Dionysus' ears. Faced with Leomping words, Dionysus asked unhurriedly, "Little tricks? Then tell me, What is the essence of the universe? As he spoke, the storm in the surroundings roared like a dragon. The cyclone, that was more than tens of thousands of meters long, started to tremble. It gave off the feeling that the entire world was roaring along with Dionysus' words. Then, they pounced towards Li Onping, who was in the center of the storm, together with no regard for anything else. Faced with the crazy attacks that were coming at him, Li Onping could only see nothing but airflow. Endless gales were slashing towards him at a speed of more than 400 kilometers per second. From the outside, it looked as if a gaseous planet was collapsing violently and was continuously collapsing inwards. Li Onping merely shook his arms slightly, lowered his waist, and sat in a horse stance before throwing out a punch. After the punch, time seemed to have come to a standstill at this moment, and everyone was amazed by the surging power. The storm in front of him was like a cake that had been sliced with a knife. With Li Onping's punch, the storm that was 12,000 meters deep was split into two. What was it like to destroy the world? What was it like to collapse the world? Li Onping's punch was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. It was enough to make the heavens collapse and the earth sink. After the punch was thrown out, Li Onping's figure flashed, and he once again appeared before Dionysus. He let out a hideous laugh, and his entire right fist turned into a stream of light that shone toward Dionysus. A stream of light was not just a description. Li Onping's entire right palm had truly turned into light. If it was said that Dionysus had only felt astonished that Li Onping had broken the cosmic storm that he had created with a single punch, then after Li Onping threw out this punch, his astonishment turned into astonishment. How fast was the speed of light? It was 300,000 kilometers per second. There was no chance for Dionysus to react at all. The several 100,000 punches had completely destroyed all of the force fields and barriers on the surface of his body. Then, before the surrounding storm engulfed him, his body was completely torn apart. However, long before he had removed the demiplane and entered the cosmic space, Dionysus had already elementalized his body and turned it into a gaseous state. Although Li Onping's attack had torn apart his body, it still did not really cause him any harm. Dionysus' body turned into the omnipresent wind and retreated rapidly. He said in astonishment, "What was with your attack earlier? What happened to your arm?" Li Onping stood where he was without moving. However, his arm that had turned into a stream of light had returned to its original state. The only difference was that there was a small lump of gas that kept on circulating in the palm of his arm. It seemed to be struggling to escape, but Li Onping held it tightly in his hand. Dionysus' countenance changed. It was a part of his body that had been vaporized. However, at the next moment, Li Onping's actions caused Dionysus' countenance to change drastically. Li Onping loosened his grip, and the white air current that had escaped was sucked into his stomach. "You actually ate me?" Dionysus' shock and fury only received Li Onping's bloodthirsty gaze. Li Onping said slowly, "I'm very, very, very interested in your current body." With a flash, he got close to Dionysus again. "Can you give me a little more?" When Li Onping said this, Dionysus had already activated Time Stop. With the extra 10 seconds of casting time, he added several million layers of defensive spells on himself. When time resumed its flow, his body was countless times tougher than the toughest magic fortress on the Mundo continent. Now, even if he were to face a positron cannon, he would be able to escape unscathed. Looking at Dionysus, who was wrapped up like a colored lantern, Li Onping asked coldly, "Are you scared?" At the next moment, both of his arms disappeared at the same time. They turned into light and struck out toward Dionysus at the speed of light. The several million layers of defensive spells were torn apart and destroyed instantly. When Dionysus activated teleportation to escape, a small part of his gaseous body had been taken away by Li Onping again. A roar that was filled with humiliation and fury rang out through the entire cosmic storm as a medium. Chapter 380. Then he swallowed a mouthful, swallowing the white stream of air completely into his throat. Seeing Li Onping repeating this action again, Dionysus felt both shocked and furious. "You're a lunatic." Leonping casually shattered the gales that were coming at him from the surroundings and said coldly, "Flashy attacks." Simultaneously, his body chewed up Dionysus' body, and countless information and data emerged from his brain, analyzing the profoundness of elementization. Dionysus let out a furious bellow, and his enraged spirit controlled the gales that were several tens of thousands of meters long. They were like a huge meat grinder, grinding toward the Onping body. The terrifying power contained within them was enough to open up a huge hole on the surface of a planet, all the way to the core of the planet. Leonping looked at the terrifying gales that filled up his vision and said slowly, "I admire your power, but when it comes to real battles, I'm greatly disappointed." Leonping looked at the gales around him and said calmly, "Look at your self-created magic. It's filled with the desire to show off. It's amazing when you're bullying people who are weaker than you. But when you're up against people who are as strong as you, or even stronger than you, what kind of nonsensical attacks are these? You're always replicating and piling up these gorgeous natural phenomena. It's like an empty essay. No matter how beautiful the writing is, there's no meaning to it." At the next moment, Li Onping punched out, and a power that could destroy the entire continental shelf with a single punch was condensed at a single point. Within 1 second, it tore through all the gales along the way and smashed out fiercely toward Dionysus. But this time, Dionysus didn't bother to defend himself. His body gradually faded away, turning into countless hurricanes that scattered in all directions. In the end, he merged with the cyclone and became a part of the cosmic storm. Then, the storm seemed to come alive. The countless hurricanes formed the image of Dionysus, and he shouted angrily, "I'm going to kill you." Dionysus said angrily, "Li Onping, you'll pay the price for your arrogance." "Ha, arrogant, huh? I can feel that the fear in your heart has become more serious." With a casual sweep of Li Onping's hand, it was as if he had opened up an opening that was several kilometers long in the space before him. He had already turned the countless gales that were attacking him into nothingness, and his surroundings had also turned into a vacuum that was several hundred meters wide. "Look at you. You're like a white swan in a chicken farm. You think you're so high and mighty. Look at the magic you came up with. They're all used to bully the weak. Once you deal with someone as strong as you, or even stronger than you, you're useless except for your beauty." When Leonping finished his sentence, Dionysus stopped talking. Instead, he decided to make Leonping pay a heavy price for his rudeness. Seeing that the normal storm was ineffective against Leonping, he changed his attack method again. A speck of light was born in the depths of the storm. It was as if a single spark could start a prairie fire. At the next moment, overwhelming flames filled up Leonping's eyes. The endless flames even lit up the entire void nearby. They were the flames that Dionysus had released himself, and they had ignited the entire storm. If the previous storm was a gaseous planet, then the entire cosmic storm that had been ignited had become a small sun. The huge flames even shone directly onto the Mondo continent after a few minutes. A second sun appeared in the sky, causing the people of Mondo to gasp in astonishment. The battle between the two of them had already caused a change in the weather. The scene in front of him reminded Leonping of the simulated sun that the Heavenly Queen and the others had once performed under Tianjing. However, compared to the simulated sun that the Heavenly Queen and the others had performed, the sun that Dionysus had created could be considered a real, small sun. Tremendous pressure, terrifying high temperature, and nuclear fusion reactions that were going on all the time. The gas around Leonping had completely turned into plasma. Not to mention breathing, just a tiny bit of the plasma gas would be enough to burn down an entire city on the Mondo continent. At this moment, Leonping even had the illusion that he was at the center of the universe. Although Dionysus didn't understand the physics knowledge that he had summarized on Earth, his countless understandings of nature and the universe allowed him to recreate the various phenomena in the universe with his experience and proficiency. The same was true for the sun in front of him. It was an ultimate spell that he had created after observing the sun countless times. However, Even in this type of environment that was enough to make all level 5 ability users and sorcerers feel despair, Li Onping was still completely unharmed, the space within a meter of his body even more so calm, to the extent where it maintained a negative 200 degrees Celsius cosmic space state. It's still a spell that simulates natural phenomena. Countless formulas and numbers flashed past Li Onping's eyes as he searched for traces of Dionysus. As for the attacks around him, although they were shocking, he didn't take them to heart at all. At his level, the natural environment around him had completely become his domain and was under his control. In some planes, this could be called a divine domain. As long as he wanted to, he could forever maintain the vacuum state around him that was negative 200 degrees Celsius. It wouldn't change because of the changes that Dionysus made to the environment. Therefore, attacks that purely simulated natural phenomena were useless against him. Even if Dionysus strengthened the wind blades and flames into cosmic storms and suns, it was still the same. As Li Onping searched for traces of Dionysus, he murmured, "Where are you? My little dessert." At the next moment, a hint of cold light flashed in his eyes, and his arms disappeared completely in the next moment, turning into endless light. The piercing light was like countless sharp swords, as if wanting to pierce through the entire ball of fire formed by the cosmic tempest. Countless tongues of fire emerged from the ball of fire. It was as if the entire firestorm was on the verge of collapsing in the next moment. At the same time that Li Onping launched this attack, he dashed out like a bolt of lightning, piercing through the small sun and creating a vacuum corridor. When he stopped, he had already slowly closed his mouth. At the same time, the white gas at the corner of his mouth was struggling like some kind of animal's tail, but in the end, he still took a deep breath and completely swallowed it down his throat. What an interesting body. It's wonderful and full of the mysteries of life. This elemental magic is much more important than these flashy techniques that you're studying. It's a pity that you don't understand it all. When Li Onping said this, Dionysus only saw him eating a part of his body again. Flames of anger filled his mind, causing the firestorm that he transformed into terror again. He didn't understand how Li Onping's arms could turn into light to attack, nor did he understand how Li Onping could accurately discover his form and eat him. However, if he were still in his human form, he knew that he would probably be in a state where his blood vessels would burst from anger. Ever since he became the most powerful person in the Mondo continent, he hadn't felt this way for a long time. The magic shooters who were high and mighty in the eyes of mortals were not much stronger than ants in his eyes. After being humiliated, the feeling of having his blood boiling, the feeling of his heart contracting, and the feeling of fear in his heart was something that he hadn't felt for a very, very long time. The firestorm that was the size of an asteroid began to tremble, and a strange change began. Originally, Dionysus had created a total of 9 magic spells based on his understanding of the universe and nature. He called them the 9 techniques of creation, and the spells that he had used were the storm and sun of the 9 techniques of creation. Any one of the 9 techniques of creation had the power to destroy the entire human world. After creating them, Dionysus had thought that he had reached the pinnacle of magic and the pinnacle of the universe for a long time, and that he couldn't advance any further. He stopped continuing to study magic for a period of time, and thought that there was no path ahead. Furthermore, the word creation in the names of the spells that he had created was a clear indication of how highly he regarded himself and his spells. That was until he received the information about technology from Shang Tian, who was also at him. He felt surprised, excited, and happy that there was a direction for magic to advance again. Immediately after, he deduced the 10th technique of the 9 techniques of creation based on the physics and astronomy parts. It was also a natural phenomenon that he had never thought of just based on his own observations and conclusions. It was something that he had never thought of at all, something that was completely beyond his imagination and experience. It was the ultimate celestial body in the universe that even Dionysus himself had never really observed. It was a celestial body that only existed in his imagination after he learned about Earth. It was a black hole, The entire huge fireball started to collapse, and endless powers caused it to keep on shrinking inwards. The several tens of thousands of meters in length kept on shrinking, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. The bright light was also gradually extinguishing, causing the surrounding void space to turn dim once again. It seemed as if it wanted to absorb everything in the surroundings. In fact, when Li Anping attacked again, the light that his hands had turned into began to distort. Oh! Seeing the changes in front of him, a hint of surprise flashed in Li Anping's eyes. He had already guessed what Dionysus was thinking. According to his calculations, the artificial celestial body that was about to be born might not be a real black hole, but the gravitational force that it produced would be enough to change the orbit of the magical star. Once it continued to be born without a limit, it might even cause the extinction of all the creatures on the magical star. Although Li Anping looked down on Dionysus's method of using magic, he had to admit that Dionysus had surpassed him in terms of pure strength. At the very least, he definitely couldn't create an artificial celestial body of such strength. It seems that it won't be that easy to eat a few more mouthfuls. Li Anping's arms slowly dissipated again, turning into light that was everywhere. Chapter 381. Light. The light that was everywhere pierced through the darkness. In Dionysus' black hole, Li Anping opened up a new world with his light-speed punch. No matter how the huge fireball collapsed and contracted, it couldn't really complete the collapse of the black hole under the bombardment of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of attacks per second. The speed of light should be the limit of speed in the universe. It was an extreme speed that humans could never reach with their own bodies. Even in the magic of the Mondo continent, there was no way to turn one's own elements into light. That was why Dionysus found it unbelievable that Li Anping could perform the light speed punch. That was the speed of light. No matter what object it was, even if it was a speck of dust, it would require an infinite amount of energy to accelerate it to the speed of light. Every punch that reached the speed of light was equivalent to a magnitude 12 earthquake for the entire eastern continent. The shock waves from every punch were enough to flatten the entire Centurion continent, and the shock waves from every punch were enough to set off an apocalyptic tsunami that could engulf the entire human world. Now, such punches were appearing at a frequency of tens of thousands of times per second, piercing out endless rays of light in all directions. How is this possible? How did he do it? Under the endless light speed punches, Dionysus' black hole magic couldn't be completed at all. In fact, it even showed signs of disintegration. However, compared to the current situation of the black hole magic, Dionysus was more concerned about how long the light speed punch that Li Anping was using could be used. If the light speed punch could be said to be a huge burden on Li Anping, then Dionysus looked at Li Anping, who had almost turned into a ball of light that was as bright as the sun. It was clear that he could perform the light speed punch at will without any side effects. In the next moment, a ray of light that was like a supernova explosion instantly shrouded the entire artificial celestial body. The light speed punch that was more than 100 million times per second pierced the entire artificial celestial body into countless pieces. Under the control of Dionysus, the entire celestial body once again turned into a hurricane that was everywhere. It formed a giant head that was more than 10,000 meters long that shrouded Li Anping. The appearance of the head was that of Dionysus. He looked as if he could devour a planet with just a few mouthfuls at any time. The atmosphere of the entire storm celestial body trembled, producing thunderous roars. Li Anping, although your light-speed fist is powerful, it is impossible for you to truly defeat me. Li Anping looked coldly at the cosmic storm before him and said indifferently, "Do you still not understand? What does this pair of hands represent?" Just as Li Anping said this, not only his hands, but even his legs, torso, and chest began to change. It was as if he had turned into a mass of distorted light. Didn't you ask me about the nature of the universe? Then do you know that the history of the universe can only be determined after it actually happens. What the process is only related to our observation method, and it can be unrelated to our observation time. What Li Onping said was the result of the famous delay experiment. He proved that any fundamental quantum phenomenon was only a phenomenon after it was recorded. Whether we made a decision before or during the photon journey made no difference in quantum experiments. History was not definite and real unless it had already been observed and recorded. Nonsense. Everything has a cause and effect. How can the cause appear after the effect? Dionysus had also read about this bizarre theory from books on Earth. However, he did not believe in this experiment at all. It was not in line with his actual experience. Li Onping ignored Dionysus' rebuttal and put out his palm. When he opened his palm, there was once again a mass of white air current in his palm. Li Onping opened his mouth and inhaled, sucking Dionysus into his mouth. How is this possible? Before Dionysus could shout out this sentence, the white light had already pierced through a spot where his vaporized body was hidden in the storm. What made him even more horrified was that the spot where the light had pierced through was the part of his body that had appeared in Li Onping's palm out of nowhere and had been eaten by him. If the fact that Li Onping could accurately find his body in such a huge cosmic storm only made him feel surprised, then the scene in front of him made him feel horrified. The next moment, Li Onping's voice sounded again. It was like the knell of death, causing Dionysus to tremble. Although the universe has theoretically evolved for tens of billions of years, it is not until an intelligent creature really observes it that it becomes certain. Our observation itself has become part of the creation of a universe. Before the observer observes it, the constants of the entire universe are a series of uncertainties. After the observer observes them, they become certain. Only when these constants are accurately maintained within a certain range can a good environment be created, allowing the observer to survive and continue observing the universe. The existence of consciousness has, in turn, created its history. Li Onping's words were like a magic voice that poured into one's brain. After hearing his theory, Dionysus only felt that his head was buzzing. The strangeness of this theory made his brain feel as if it was going to explode. However, Li Onping's personal demonstration made him feel that it made sense. Just then, Li Onping's hands had turned into countless streams of light, piercing through the cosmic storm once again. The reason why my hands can reach the speed of light is that they have turned into light. In the entire universe, only light itself can reach the speed of light. Of course, if a teleportation portal was opened at both ends of the universe, the instant a person passed through the portal, it would be considered as traveling at faster than light speed. However, this is no longer the true faster than light speed. Just as Li Onping's body was emitting more and more streams of light, as if countless long spears were piercing through Dionysus' brain, the words that Li Onping said pushed Dionysus' mental receptivity to the limit. The original appearance of all matter is only related to our means of observation. The world in the eyes of humans, animals, insects, and microbes are all different. Light, time, and space each appear differently in their eyes. However, what each of them sees is the real world. It's just that their means of observation are different. What the world and the universe are like is only related to the differences in the observers. What can't be observed is meaningless. At the next moment, the pure light turned into countless thorns, piercing toward various parts of Dionysus' body. At this moment, Li Onping's hands were no longer hands, but had turned into real light. These lights did not have any consciousness. They were just the superposition of countless probabilistic wave functions. They turned into countless waves, operating according to the unique algorithm that Li Onping had designed. Before the waves reached their target, they would undergo self-observation once again, turning into particles to penetrate the target. Each time Li Onping swung his fist, a stream of white air currents would be sucked into his mouth. As he engulfed more and more air currents, the light on his fist would become increasingly brilliant and dazzling. Dionysus was running around tiredly to fend off Li Onping's attacks. The celestial body's composition changed from the tempest to the land, and then from the land to the sea. Next, it was the force field, lightning, and metal. However, it was all meaningless. Li Onping's attacks were like light that was everywhere. No matter what matter it was, they would be pierced through and torn apart. As Dionysus' body was devoured by Li Onping bit by bit, his terror continued to be magnified. Finally, Dionysus let out a cry, and his body combined once again. After performing Time Stop, Dionysus opened up a teleportation gate. He then performed over 100 level, 10 spells, and targeted them at Li Onping. After Time Stop came to an end, Dionysus darted into the teleportation gate and disappeared. Only his voice still reverberated in this space. Li Onping, I benefited a lot from this exchange. Next time, I'll repay you well. After walking out of the teleportation gate, Dionysus' mind was filled with the attacks from earlier on, as well as the theories that Li Onping had mentioned. They were like millions of bombs that had completely destroyed his outlook on the world, life, and values. Li Onping remained in space. His eyes were tightly shut, as if he had entered a state of deep meditation. He did not express any opinion about Dionysus' escape. The white air currents continued to circulate in his body. They were not absorbed by him directly, but were continuously analyzed by his brain. After a very, very long time, perhaps a few days, or perhaps a few hours, he slowly opened his eyes. There was a hint of understanding in his eyes. The light that was everywhere had already covered his entire body, and it had even started to spread toward his head slowly. During the time when Li Onping was communicating with Dionysus, the battle on the Mondo continent had intensified. After the Holy Roland Kingdom's Guild of Magic branch was attacked by an explosion, there were immediately prophets who came to calculate who caused this terrible attack. When the images of Jin Guang and Lu Feng appeared in front of them, the royal family of the Holy Roland Kingdom was enraged. They directly mobilized 18 magic shooters in the country to pursue them. The headquarters of the Mage Guild even issued a comprehensive arrest warrant. As long as the demons could be captured, the Mage Guild would fulfill any request. Under the pressure of Adam, the other 4 empires also sent troops to attack the Alama Basin. They vowed to attack the gates of hell and kill all the demons. This was the joint effort of the 5 empires and the Mage Guild of Magic under the pressure of Dionysus. It was also a huge military operation that had not been seen in the Mondo continent for hundreds of years. There were more than 100 magic shooters, 5 martial magicians, and Adam, who was the son of the demigod. Such a huge force made the people of the Mondo continent believe that it was only a matter of time before they annihilated the demons and occupied the gates of hell. Chapter 382. Late at night, the white moonlight shone on the Umla Basin. Feng Haojia, who was in the camp, looked up. The moon here was very similar to the one on Earth, but this was a completely different world. When Yin Bei, Lu Feng, and Jin Guang went to investigate the magic planet, Feng Haojia was chosen to stay in the camp due to his lack of experience. He was also responsible for some of the collection and investigation work in the Umla Basin. Compared to Jin Guang, Yin Bei, and the others who were in danger, Feng Haojia had a very leisurely life. However, the situation changed on the 4th day. He suddenly found that he had lost contact with Earth. The portal from the magic planet to the White Land was blocked by an invisible barrier. He did not know that this was the demi-plane entrance set up by Dionysus. Unless he took the initiative to remove it or the entrance was destroyed, no one could enter the White Land from the magic world. And people who enter the magic planet from the White Land would also be directly sent to his demi-plane. In the face of this calm and strange situation, the only thing Feng Haojia could do was to stay in the camp and continue to complete the previous mission. However, he had already planned in his heart. After a month, if he still could not contact anyone and Jin Guang and Yin Bei did not send anyone to find him, he planned to leave the camp and look for traces of his teammates. Today was already the 7th day he had waited. The team members who were supposed to have returned as promised were nowhere to be seen, and there was still no contact from Earth. In the past few days, Fong Haojia had also tried many methods to pass through the invisible barrier in front of the portal. But whether it was his annihilation ability, the crimson lightning in his hand, the lightsaber, or the weapons equipped with the nano-armor, none of them could do anything to the invisible barrier. Next to the fire, just when Fong Haojia saw the moon in the sky and thought about what to do, he suddenly heard a whooshing sound in his ears. He quietly reached for the laminar arc plasma sword at his waist and gently placed his finger on the switch of the lightsaber. At the same time, the psychic energy in his body swept in all directions like a radar, scanning the area 500 meters around him. 1, 2, 3. Fong Haojia muttered in his heart. In the perception of his psychic chi, 3 adult men were slowly approaching him from his left, right, and back. 2 of them were very close to him, and the one facing him from the back was about 100 meters away. On the other side, Magic Apprentice Wei Luan was speaking to the 2 servant swordsmen through wind message. Approach slowly. Don't let him discover you. Remember to attack after I release my spell. Once these demons enter battle mode, their scales will cover their heads. At that time, ordinary attacks won't be able to cut through their scales, so we have to cut off their heads before that happens. Wei Luan saw the 2 swordsmen nodding at him in the dark. He cast the Eagle Eyes spell on himself again and looked at Fong Haojia, who was beside the fire. Once again, he recalled the information about the silver demons and confirmed that there were no mistakes. When they enter battle mode, their bodies will be covered in silver. Their scales are extremely tough. Ordinary swords, spears, flames, and ice won't be effective against them. However, they seem to be more afraid of electricity. A powerful enough electric shock can paralyze them for a short while. Their eyes can see through the dark. Smoke and invisibility are useless against them. We have to approach them from behind quietly. Sometimes they will suddenly disappear. But don't be nervous. They don't really disappear. It's just that the light passes through their bodies. At this time, dust and water are the best choices. The information about the silver demons flowed through Wei Luan's mind word by word. He clenched his fists nervously, and the magical elements slowly moved from the void to his fingertips. In the next moment, there was a flash of lightning. A glaring electric snake pierced through the air like a bolt of lightning, shooting toward Fong Haojia's location. The moment the spell was released, Wei Luan couldn't be bothered to hide anymore. He roared attack. But just as the 2 swordsmen rushed out, they saw an unbelievable scene. The silver demon, sitting beside the fire, seemed to have turned into a faint shadow. The bright electric light pierced through his body, leaving a scorched mark on the ground. However, the silver demon stood up unscathed. Just as the 2 swordsmen were in a daze, not knowing if they should continue to attack, Fong Haojia had once again completed the transformation from an incorporeal body to a physical body. At the same time, his finger gently pressed on the switch of the laminar arc plasma sword. The light blade extended to a distance of 5 meters, circling around Fong Haojia's body gently. It was as if a white moon had risen from the ground. The 2 swordsmen who were touched by this moon were swept by the light blade that had a temperature of over 20,000 degrees Celsius. They were sliced into 2 and fell to the ground. Fong Haojia put away the light blade and turned to look toward Wei Luan's location. He then took a step forward, and his body once again turned from a physical body to an incorporeal body. Driven by inertia, he passed through countless obstacles and flew rapidly toward Wei Luan's location. Seeing that the silver demon was charging toward him, Wei Luan let out a cry. However, his long-term training did not cause him to lose his rationality and turn to flee. With a light tap of his fingertips, 8 electric arrows shot toward Fong Haojia, who was coming toward him. However, this attack was completely useless against Fong Haojia, who was in an incorporeal state. It pierced through his body and broke a few trees. Meanwhile, Fong Haojia had already arrived before Wei Luan. His body turned from an incorporeal state to an incorporeal state again, and he patted Wei Luan's shoulder with one hand. The electric shock was emitted by the gloves made up of nanotechnology armor, creating an effect similar to that of stun gun. Wei Luan's body stiffened, and he fell to the ground. This electric shock effect would cause an adult to be completely paralyzed within 10 minutes, rendering them unable to resist. It was specially designed to capture targets alive. Feng Haojia's purpose of doing this was to capture Wei Luan alive and ask him about the current situation in the Mondo continent. However, just as he lifted Wei Luan up from the ground, two ear-piercing sounds entered his ears again. He turned around vigilantly, and the laminar arc plasma sword at his waist had already produced a conventional light blade that was over 2 meters long. It swept toward Wei Luan's back reflexively. "Don't be nervous, it's us." Behind Feng Haojia, Tony's right hand had turned pitch black, and he was blocking Feng Haojia's light blade. The temperature of 20,000 degrees Celsius was like an ordinary light stick, and it could not hurt his pitch black right hand at all. This was his bloodline ability, absolute black domain. Behind him, Ivan was standing at the side with a pale Brian on his back. Chapter 383. You're finally back. Feng Haojia looked around and asked, "Where are the others?" Suddenly, he turned his eyes to Brian's broken arm and asked, "Were you attacked?" Tony shook his head. "We'll talk about it later. Let's go through the portal first. I have important information to report to His Majesty." Hearing Tony's words, Feng Haojia smiled bitterly and said, "The portal is blocked. We can't go through." A few minutes later, Ivan punched and kicked at the blue portal. However, no matter how hard he tried, his hands and feet were blocked by an imperceptible membrane. After another heavy punch on the membrane, Ivan said angrily, "Damn it. What's going on? Is it the work of those magicians again?" Brian sat on the ground and said with a pale face, "Who knows? Those magicians have endless tricks up their sleeves. From the way they chased after us, they must have known of our existence in advance. It's not strange that the portal is blocked now." Feng Haojia's face was also very pale. He was very worried after learning about the current situation of the expedition team from Ivan. At this moment, Tony walked out from the small forest at the side. There were still mottled bloodstains on his hands. It was the blood of the magic apprentice, Wei Luan. Obviously, he had just been tortured in the woods. Tony said to Feng Haojia and the other two, "Bad news, guys. According to the information of the survivor, Golden Light, and the others seem to have planted a tactical nuclear bomb in the enemy's hometown." Ivan was the first to laugh out loud. "I like this information." He raised his right arm and wanted to high-five Brian, but the latter only looked at him coldly, and Ivan put down his hand awkwardly. Brian said gloomily, "They've stirred up a hornet's nest by doing this." Tony smiled bitterly and shrugged. "You're right. According to the magic apprentice, the 5 empires have gathered 1,000,000 soldiers, each led by 5 martial magicians, and are coming in the direction of the Umla Basin." Brian said, 1,000,000 soldiers. With their productivity, it will take them at least 3 months to gather 1,000,000 soldiers and get here. Don't forget that they have magic. Tony washed the blood off his hands and continued, "They can quickly gather an army through teleportation magic, and these ordinary soldiers are only cannon fodder. The real trouble is the sorcerers and the other magicians who want to come and get share of the loot. Humans die for wealth, and birds die for food. Look, even an apprentice magician dares to come here." Ivan shouted, "Then what do? We can't just sit and wait." Brian shook his head and said, "We can't sit and wait, but we're not completely defenseless." Yin Bei and Jin Guang should have heard the news as well. They could rush over at any time. Earth should also be trying to find a way to open the portal. With Your Majesty around, I think it's only a matter of time. Brian touched the wound on his severed arm and said, "We can use the weapons in the camp to delay the Allied forces. If the World Crossing Gate is never opened." Tony immediately replied, "Then let's retreat. If that happens, we won't be able to control the situation of this battle." 5 sharp claws extended from Ivan's palms and clashed with each other. "I like this idea. What should we do next?" After Ivan said this, the remaining 3 people looked at Tony. After a year of Li Onping's training, Tony had been in charge of the family affairs for a long time. His every move had the demeanor of a leader. Plus, Everybody knew that he had been possessed by Li Yanping. With this hidden identity, he had become the leader of this temporary team. Tony thought for a moment and said to Fong Haojia, "Fong, you're most familiar with this place. Come with me to set up the defenses." Then he turned to Brian and Ivan. "Brian, you take a rest here and help us guard the camp. Ivan, patrol the area around Amara Basin and clean up all the trash." "Understood." Ivan's body began to swell as he spoke. Gray hair emerged from the surface of his body. His nostrils grew longer, and his ears perked up. He had turned into a giant wolf that walked upright. The nanotechnology armor adjusted itself according to his body shape and covered his entire body in the end. The wolf put on a hideous grin. Ivan's teeth were knocking up and down like two guillotines. "Don't worry, I'll turn them all into fertilizer for the forest." After saying that, Ivan turned invisible under the effect of the optical camouflage. He turned into a ghost wolf and lunged into the woods of the Amara Basin. After Ivan left, Tony nodded at Brian and said, "Have a good rest. If there's anything, tell us through the communication channel of the nanotechnology armor." Although the satellite had been destroyed, the communication channel of the nanotechnology armor was still effective within several kilometers. While talking, Fong Haojia and Tony walked to the warehouse of the camp. They were going to set up a circle of defenses in the woods of the Amara Basin with the weapons stored there. While Tony and the other three were setting up the defenses, on the other side of the portal, by Xinghe, Emma, and the doctor had all arrived at the Land of White. Seeing Emma and the doctor busy at the portal leading to the magic planet, Bai Xinghe bowed and said to the psychic clone beside him, "Your Majesty, how's the situation over there? The other party's teleportation gate is very complicated. Even Emma and the professor would need more than 12 hours to destroy it." The psychic clone said, "It's okay. My real body can't make it over for the time being. Gather the troops first. When the portal opens, we'll probably be greeted by a war." "War?" A strange look flashed in by Xinghe's eyes. Then he lowered his head and retreated. When he rushed back to Earth, an expeditionary force targeting the magic world had already begun to gather. The imaginary number service, the Xia Dragonfinch, the superior ability users of the human armed forces, the elite special forces who were all wearing nanotechnology armor, and the fully armed armored troops slowly moved to the underwater base and arrived at the Land of White through the portal there. At present, there were more than 6 level 5 ability users in the Land of White. The nano-soldiers and the armored troops made up a total of 20,000 people. The solemn atmosphere before the war slowly spread among the soldiers. In the woods, 7 adventurers were sitting around a bonfire. There were 3 magicians, 2 swordsmen, a hunter, and a beautiful woman with pointy ears and a beautiful face who carried a longbow on her back. A crackling sound came from the bonfire. The hunter stretched himself and rubbed his eyes tiredly. As a hunter at the border of the Holy Roland Empire, he would never have come to a barren place like the Amara Basin if it weren't for the fact that these adventurers gave him enough gold coins. The oldest of the magicians, a middle-aged man, asked, "Is this place already considered the Amara Basin?" The hunter immediately sat up straight and replied respectfully, "This is already considered the periphery of the basin. According to our speed, we should be able to reach our destination before noon tomorrow." Another magician, who looked to be in his 20s and had freckles on his face, frowned and said, "Why haven't we encountered a single silver demon so far? Didn't they all come from the Hell's Gate in the Amara Basin?" The hunter said awkwardly, "I'm not too sure. I grew up at the border of the Empire and only now know that there are silver demons in the Amara Basin." The young woman with a bow and arrow on her back said, "I heard that the Hell's Gate only opened recently. Not many of those demons came out." Speaking of this, her eyes were full of splendor. "I heard that the Allied forces have already set out. If we can catch a few silver demons before they arrive, then we'll have the opportunity to have Sir Halfling personally enchant us with magic." Hearing this woman's voice, the 2 young magicians stared at the girl's face as if they wanted to eat her alive. "Don't worry, Miss Alice. We'll definitely help you catch a silver demon." Yes, Senior Chiao Wei has already become a superior magician. As long as we encounter those silver demons, we'll definitely be able to catch them. The middle-aged magician, Qiao Wei, sighed inwardly, feeling a little amused. His two juniors were still too young and still had feelings for mortal women in their hearts. Although the Alice in front of him was indeed beautiful and was a mixed blood of human and elf, in the end, she was still just a mortal. Qiao Wei looked only middle-aged, but he was actually more than 100 years old. Looking at his two juniors beside him, it was as if he was looking at himself when he was young. The time they spent studying magic was too short, and they were too young. Only when they saw those mortals grow old and die in front of their eyes time and time again did they realize the difference between themselves and these mortals. Only magic was eternal. Qiao Wei was very willing to help his two juniors understand this point. It didn't matter even if it took 5 or 10 years. Time couldn't leave a mark on a magician's body, but it was enough to turn a young girl into an old woman with a face full of wrinkles. The two swordsmen at the side were silent from the beginning to the end. Compared to the nobility of magicians, swordsmen were the most helpless choice of commoners who didn't have magic talent but wanted to stand out. They were well aware of the difference between them and magicians, so when the two young magicians revealed their admiration for Alice, they didn't take the initiative to speak to her again. Just then, one of the swordsmen suddenly stood up and said, "I think I heard something." The other young magician said unhappily, "What sound?" There was no reaction from the warning spell. "It's probably some small animal. Better be careful. Even I'm no match for the strong ones among the silver demons. Once there's any danger, be prepared to enter the portal that I've opened." The middle-aged magician, Qiao Wei, also stood up and continued, "And I've only set up a spell to detect humanoid creatures. There may indeed be other types of ferocious beasts in this basin." Just as Qiao Wei finished speaking, he released a large animal detection spell from his fingertips. But the moment the spell was released, his expression changed. As he turned back, Ivan's bloody mouth was already biting down on his head. In everyone's eyes, they could only see that Qiao Wei's head was covered by a layer of transparent material, as if he had become a headless corpse. The two swordsmen roared angrily and pounced over, while the two young magicians began to cast spells while chanting. Alice drew her bow and arrow, aiming at the place where Qiao Wei's head had disappeared. In their imaginations, as a high-level magician, Qiao Wei wouldn't be killed so quickly with just his protective force field. But Ivan didn't think so. In his mouth, rows of sharp teeth that had been modified by nanotechnology armor suddenly vibrated. There were several 10,000 high-speed tremors every second, and it was as if there were over 10 high-frequency wave swords. With a gentle clench of his jaws, the defensive force field shattered in an instant, and Qiao Wei's head was swallowed whole. Blood spurted out from the wound and dyed a huge wolf head red as it floated in the air. Blood splashed on his body, so Ivan simply removed the optical camouflage. The huge wolf body of more than 5 meters was immediately revealed, filled with a huge sense of oppression. Before the two swordsmen could get close, they were already torn into countless pieces by his sharp claws. The two young magicians who were supposed to support the swordsmen saw how easily Qiao Wei was killed. One of them stood there trembling, not knowing what to do, while the other turned and ran like Hunter and Alice. Ivan's wolf mouth revealed a trace of a sinister smile. The next moment, he was on all fours, chasing after the magician like a wild wolf in the forest. A black shadow flashed, and the magician who was standing there in a daze didn't have time to react before his neck was broken by the wolf's claws covered in superalloy. On the other side, Alice ran into the depths of the forest in a panic. Although she didn't have magic talent, the elf bloodline gave her agile movements and agile reactions. But when she heard 2 consecutive screams behind her, her heart was already shrouded in the fear of death. Hearing the sound of the giant wolf chasing after her, she ran faster and faster, but accidentally tripped on a branch and fell to the ground. When she got up and wanted to continue running, waves of hot air mixed with the smell of blood came from behind her head. Violent panting sounded in her ears. She felt a huge wolf claw slowly pressing down on her head. Alice didn't dare to move. She opened her mouth, wanting to beg for mercy, but didn't know what to say. Just as she was panicking, a sharp wolf claw had already pierced through her skull, turning her brain into powder. Chapter 384. Early in the morning, on the plains 10 miles away from the Amara Basin, over 100 huge teleportation gates were opened, and countless soldiers and mages came out of the teleportation gates like ants. They were like the cold weapons army of the Middle Ages, armed with swords and spears, wearing armor, and exuding a barbaric aura. But what they did next was completely different from what the ancient army did. Under the joint casting of countless magicians, rows of huge earth walls that were several kilometers long and more than 10 meters tall rose up. Those were the temporary camps of the Allied army. After being modified by magic, it could easily house millions of soldiers. And after magic solidification, the defense of these earth walls was comparable to steel. Even bombs might not be able to blow them up. And there was a big difference between this Allied army and the ordinary ancient army. When he said 1 million people, it really was 1 million people. These 1 million people were all brave warriors who were good at fighting. After being blessed by the magicians with a series of spells such as Bear Strength, Leopard Speed, Iron Skin, and Perseverance, they were simply a group of war machines. In addition to them, there were dozens of huge steel puppets more than 8 meters high that were quietly pushed out of the portals. They were war puppets made by magic shooters who were good at alchemy. This time, because of the emergency conscription by the Guild of Magic, they were also sent here. There were more than 1 million soldiers, but they did not need any logistical support or supplies. This was because there were hundreds of portals right beside them. At any time, countless servants would walk out of the portals to distribute food, weapons, and armor to them. Even the captain-level soldiers would be distributed with magic devices made by mages to have more powerful strength. And this army of more than 1 million was all commanded by the mind magic of the mages. Although the whole camp was huge, it was like a huge ant's nest. It appeared to be in good order, without the slightest chaos. In the center of the huge military camp on the plains, another teleportation gate that was over 5 meters tall rose up. Countless warriors in golden armor walked out in a single file, immediately causing the surrounding soldiers to cry out in surprise. They were the trump card of the Holy Roland Empire, the Golden Guardians. Each of them was already a veteran of hundreds of battles and was the ultimate warrior who was not afraid of death. And after receiving the magic surgery, their combat power had been greatly increased again. Every Gold Imperial Guard had 2 hearts. Their bones were all infused with mithril and inscribed with countless regeneration and defensive magic runes. These spells could not only give them steel-like skin and spider-like sense of touch at all times, but they could even maintain most of their physiological functions when they were seriously injured and on the verge of death, so that they could continue to fight for more than a day and a night. On their skin were thousands of interconnected magic arrays carved with dragon's blood. Even if none of them had any magical talent, they could use these magic arrays to cast spells ranging from level 1 to level 3. They could even cast powerful spells ranging from level 4 to level 6 with the cooperation of 3 to 10 people. At the same time, these magic arrays could also increase their adaptability to magic, making the buff spells cast on them more effective. If the Golden Guards only surprised the surrounding soldiers, then the next person who walked out of the portal made the surrounding soldiers all cheer. It was a man wearing a long black robe. Both his robe and his clothes were embroidered with gold. The golden hexagram on his chest symbolized his identity. He was the king of sorcerers, the strongest sorcerer in the empire, and the field marshal. And he appeared together with the golden guards of the Holy Roland Empire. Naturally, he was the field marshal of the Holy Roland Empire, Fong Sibelius. However, right after Grand Magus General Sibelius appeared, 4 more black-robed magi with golden linings walked out of the portal. They were the Grand Magus Marshals of the other 4 empires. Although the operation of the Allied forces this time was led by the 5 field marshals, According to past practice, they had never seen more than 2 field marshals on the battlefield. And now, before the battle even started, the 5 field marshals had already gathered in advance and walked out of the portal together. This is unbelievable. Do we need to take the demons so seriously this time? Of course. I heard that those demons already have the power of a sorcerer. Once they all escape from the Hell's Gate, they will overturn the entire Mondo continent. Sibelius, who is the leader, looked at the huge mud wall that was more than 10 meters tall in the distance. He then turned to an old man and said, "I'll have to trouble you. It's nothing." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man who wore a monocle and had a very handsome appearance. Sorcerers could use all kinds of magic and materials to fix their appearance forever. However, due to their different temperaments, not all of their fixed appearances were young and beautiful. The elegant old man in front of them was obviously one of them. As he spoke, his right foot lightly kicked the ground under his feet a few times. In the next moment, the whole earth shook. Under the respectful gazes of the surrounding soldiers, a huge stone pillar that was more than 10 meters in diameter and completely made of mud and stones soared into the sky, sending the 5 field marshals into the air. It gradually stopped at a height of more than 150 meters. Sibelius walked to the edge of the stone pillar and looked at the Umla Basin that was more than 10 miles away. With his current height and long-distance vision magic, he could see more than half of the Umla Basin. He murmured, "According to the scouts, silver demons have already appeared in the forest of the basin. Those guys killed many adventurers, sorcerers, and scouts." Beside Sibelius was a young woman with dark skin and long hair. Her golden-edged black robe had been specially modified. Not only did it not cover her body, but it also revealed more than half of her round breasts. There was also a pair of slender and straight legs. Her wheat-colored thighs looked very sexy. However, the 5 people present were all old monsters who had lived for hundreds of years. Beauty was not what they cared about the most. Compared to the woman's appearance, the woman's identity, and what she said attracted their attention more. Lord Adam hasn't arrived yet. According to him, he and Lord Demigod will hide in the dark to deal with the king of demons. The woman murmured, "Sibelius, I heard that you captured a silver demon. Why don't you tell me what kind of creature they are? I've never seen such a thing before." Sibelius frowned and said, "I didn't even get a chance to see him before he was blown to pieces. However, I still have a piece of their skin." As he spoke, Sibelius had already taken out a nano-armor from Lorne's body. The young woman was none other than Michelle, one of the 5 great demon marshals. Michelle took the nano-armor from Sibelius. Her eyes released all kinds of magic rays and scanned the silver nano-armor in front of her. What a strange fur. I feel like this fur is still alive. Sibelius didn't comment. He only added, their fur, or scales, are stronger than the skin of dragons. They also have the ability to refract light, which allows them to enter stealth mode at will. According to the sorcerers of the front lines, they are invulnerable, extremely strong, and have the ability to hide. These are the abilities that every silver demon has. As you all know, they also have a method that we still don't know about. It can cause large-scale explosions and curses. Even the sorcerers have to be careful. Just as Sibelius was speaking, a childlike marshal stepped forward. He looked like a cute boy of 10 years old, but the voice coming from his throat was like that of an old man over 100 years old. So troublesome. They're just a bunch of beasts who don't even know magic. Is there anything to be surprised about? As he spoke, powerful magic power surged from his body. Let me get rid of them all at once. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.